Ready, Madam Clerk? Committee of the whole meeting to order for February 23rd. Ms. Hall, would you do the land acknowledgement, please?
Yes, and thank you. We would like to acknowledge that the City and Borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous peoples of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Ganesh Chish.
Girl, sheesh. Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Hughes Candies,
Here.
Ms. Wall,
Present.
Mr. Kelly,
Here?
Ms. Adkisson,
Here.
Mr. Steininger,
Here.
Ms. Hall,
Here.
Mr. Brooks,
Here.
Madam Mayor.
Here.
And for the record, Deputy Mayor Smith is absent. You have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Hughes Candies? Did you have your hand up?
No, I don't think so. Sorry if I did.
Okay. Ms. Atkinson just wanted to hear your lovely voice, apparently. So without any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we will consider the agenda approved. Mr. Kelly, approval of minutes.
I move that the Committee of the Whole approve the 2026, January 26th, 2026 Assembly Committee of the Whole minutes and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, they are approved. So we'll move right on to agenda topics. Number 1, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Update on GLOF Enduring Solution in Phase 2 flood fighting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
Thank
favorite
you.
topic.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I would like to invite Director Koch up to give a presentation. She's got a PowerPoint in your packet that's an update on our work on the Enduring Solution with the Army Corps of Engineers and the charrette. I would ask that we have Director Koch give her presentation, and then I have some late breaking updates to inform the public about before questions, because I suspect they will, I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So if you could hold your questions till then, that would be great.
All right, we will do so. Director Koch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm assuming Madam Clerk will be able to advance the slides. Before I get started today, I want to acknowledge the gravity of what I'm going to present in this presentation. It's sobering, I think is a term that comes to mind. And I'm going to start talking about the Enduring Solution and the charrette that the Army Corps of Engineers put on in mid-December. Then that'll be the majority of the presentation. Then I will pass the presentation over to Deputy Director Nate Rumsey. He's going to talk a little bit about Hesco's, because Hesco construction is going to start soon. So it's very timely for him to give an update on that. And then we'll end with handing it back over to City Manager Kester. So next slide, please. So first, I'm going to talk about the estimated GLOF severity. And then in terms of the considerations for the Enduring Solution, I'm going to discuss items that were discussed during the charrette. The charrette was a 3-day meeting that the U.S. Army Corps held in Juneau with a whole host of consultants for the Army Corps from AECOM, a very deep level of expertise, as well as UAS participated. So did the National Weather Service, so did CBJ, so did the Forest Service, so did Tlingit and Haida. So it was a really broad group of people who participated. And then, as I mentioned, Nate will talk about phase 1 and phase 2 and the plans as they relate to preparing for this year's GLOF. Next slide, please. All right, I'm gonna talk about this slide. This is gonna be a slide that I'm gonna pause and take my time on. There'll be other slides that I'll go through much more quickly, but this is really significant information. I start with some of the information from the past that we have more surety on, and then lead into the future. So I think it's important to start with the past because it gives a sense of the magnitude when we're talking about these CFS numbers, right? So in August of 2023, when we had our first majorly destructive GLOF, that was primarily a river erosion event. That was at 14.99 feet lake stage. And more importantly, I'm going to be focusing, I think, a little bit more on the CFS piece. So we had this 34,000 CFS, and that impacted, I'm going to round a little bit just to give a sense of magnitude, not exact numbers, but it impacted about 30 homes. Then the next year, in August of 2024, we jump up to this 42,000 CFS. And just that change in that 8,000 CFS, we wound up with a very different type of event. It wasn't as much of a riverbank erosion event. It was more of an inundation event. It impacted about 300 homes. So just get a sense of that. That's what that roughly 8,000 CFS did in terms of the magnitude and how destructive it was. Then, as we all know, between 2024 and 2025, CBJ, along with help from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, constructed Hesco Barrier Phase 1. And then in August of 2025, we had an even more severe GLOF. The Hesco barriers were largely successful in protecting the areas that they were designed to protect. We know that they weren't designed to protect every area. For example, they were not designed to protect View Drive. And there was some seepage around some of the Hesco barriers, but we think without Hesco barriers in 2025, we would have had anywhere from 750 to 1,000 homes would have been impacted if there wasn't phase 1. So just to give you a sense of like how much more severe each one of these GLOFs is getting. So that number, that 51,000 CFS, when we think about what could have been without Hesco barriers, you get a sense of how shocking that 118,000 CFS number is. So I want to talk a little bit about that because it's a scary number, to be honest. It's really scary. In terms of the work that went into this number, this is a peak value. So this is a worst case scenario. It takes into account GLOF issues, and I'll talk about the GLOF issues in a moment, as well as non-GLOF contributions. So that's things like atmospheric rivers and precipitation events. Those are also, that makes up about 20,000 of that 118,000 CFS. In terms of the GLOF portions of this that contribute to this number, the vast majority, this was a really complicated number to get to this number. So this number was a result of primarily U.S. Army Corps of Engineers engineering in consultation with their large number of subject matter experts, hydrologists from AECOM, and they they were subcontracting with UAS. So a lot of the people that this assembly and everybody in this room is familiar with was part of these discussions. So this number took into account the USGS monitoring data, National Weather Service information. It took all of that into account. The basin volume is, it's complex to estimate. It's dynamic. As I know, the UAS scientists have come before this body in the past and have talked about there's these competing elements of portions of the basin expanding as they are melting, but there's also there's a height of the ice dam is also an important consideration. And there's this dance between, you know, how much melting is going to happen with the ice dam, which would minimize the volume, versus how fast is the volume expanding and melting. And then there's another consideration, and that's in glacial storage. That's a big component. And another component is how much more efficient GLOFs tend to get over time. So in some ways, if you think of it as like GLOFs tend to, as they mature, get to be look more and more like flash floods. They, whatever the exit mechanism is, and nobody knows exactly for sure what the exit mechanism is. We don't know if more exits have developed to make the GLOFs more serious, or if there's really just one exit and it's just getting bigger. Nobody knows that for sure, but from the scientists studying other glaciers in Alaska, they're pretty confident that the mechanism gets more and more efficient at conveying that water. So those are all the elements that went into USACE coming up with this 118,000 CFS number, which is a scary number to look at. Another thing to think about is when you look at the numbers up above. So when we look at the past, where we have more certainty, there is no guarantee that each GLOF is going to go up by approximately, every year is going to be approximately 8,000 to 10,000 CFS per year. It's not necessarily linear. There is a high level of certainty that over the next decades, the GLOFs are going to get bigger, but there could be individual years where you could have a particular year that is the same magnitude as the year before. So it doesn't go up in the stepwise progression, but I can tell you that, and I won't go deeply into it because Mr. Rumsey will talk about Hescos. We are, in terms of our preparation for Hescos for the 2026 GLOF, we are preparing for, to protect against more severe GLOF with a higher CFS value. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I am not going to spend a lot of time on each one of these maps, but these maps are sobering for people who are familiar with the junoflood.org, where you've got all those maps. That work was a collaboration of, there was CBJ and Michael Baker International work done for the inundation maps, and then the partnership with UAS and some of their science partners to present those maps in a more user-friendly way. Those maps go up to 20-foot lake stage, and they are, those maps in and of themselves are sobering. Those 20-foot maps are based on an 89,000 CFS number. So it is smaller than what USACE, in collaboration with all the scientific partners, think a maximum GLOF could be. The 118,000 CFS is more like a 22.5-foot lake stage GLOF. It is massive. So if Madam Clerk, if you could just go through these slides, maybe one at a time here. We're talking about a GLOF of this magnitude. If you did not have sufficient mitigation, going beyond what people experienced in 2024, which was terrible in and of itself. We're talking about water crossing over Riverside Drive, getting in, moving east into the valley, crossing over Mendenhall Loop Road, getting into the Dredge Lakes area, also having impacts on the western side of the river, having impacts all the way down, impacting the Mendenhall wastewater treatment plant, having impacts to the airport, not so much the runway, but the buildings associated with the airport. It is, you know, you're getting into the Duck Creek drainage. We're really talking more like a, we've been talking about the area that experienced the 2024 inundation as the Central Valley. A GLOF of this magnitude really gets beyond the Central Valley. Like I said, crossing over Glacier Spur Road, crossing over Mendenhall Loop Road. So, Madam Clerk, if we could go to the slide that's entitled Long-Term Solution Options Summary. Thank you. So this is a summary of some of what we talked about at the charrette. And these were the options that were the focus of that meeting. Those were the options that the Army Corps of Engineers determined were the most technically feasible of the options. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side of that table. If you look at that relocation column, and at the very bottom, you have this 2,855 properties. That's the magnitude of what could be impacted by a GLOF, that worst case scenario GLOF. And that is a numeric representation of what those previous maps were showing, because it's hard to almost get your head around how many properties we're talking about impacting. Relocation, we were really clear from the CBJ perspective that relocation is not an option from the CBJ perspective, but every federal project has a no action alternative functionally, and that's their no action alternative. Not quite no action, because they're talking about relocation, but this is that is once again hard to look at, really. Then now I'm going to move to, I'm going to start on the left-hand side, and I'm going to talk about the lake tap. I'm going to talk about the lake tap the most because you've got a long agenda ahead of you. So I'm just going to get to the punchline, and the punchline is for all of those agencies that were present at the charrette, including CBJ, the preferred alternative was a lake tap. And I also want to mention that the other entities that were present at that meeting also included Tlingit and Haida and the U.S. Forest Service. Part of the reason that I think this map, that this table is helpful is there's so much information, and I know I needed at least a way to try and distill, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of pages of U.S. Army Corps information. But this gives you a sense of the paradigm that we were looking at and some of the rationales for why a lake tap was the preferred alternative. As we were evaluating these different options, you're looking at how effective would an option be at reducing the risk. Obviously, we're trying to solve the problem of the GLOF. But you also have to look at the converse and what is the risk of failure if your solution doesn't work. Also looking at things like constructability. On the next slide, I'll also talk about the closely related timeline. I also want to point out, we've got a row here talking about operation and maintenance complexity and cost, because most of what we've been talking about and most of what I'll talk about in the rest of the presentation is about a capital project. But it's also really important to remember that there's going to be operational, we're going to have to operate whatever a solution is for a long time. And I should also clarify, it's not clear who will operate a solution. That is unclear, but it could be CBJ. So that is something to keep in mind, that the operations is important. And then the very last row is the number of properties impacted. So the lake tap was the most attractive option. And the reasons that went into that being the preferred alternative is it has a very high likelihood of reducing that GLOF risk. It is designed to drain out suicide basin at approximately the suicide basin's inflow rate. The risk of failure compared to the other options, we would have not solved the problem. So we could wind up with a GLOF of the same magnitude. But that is different than, say, a dam or a levee, where you can make the problem worse because you have more water that you're storing behind those walls functionally. And you could wind up with an even bigger wall of water. If you have like a dam break, that is catastrophic. That is absolutely catastrophic. In terms of constructability, there hasn't been geotechnical work done for any of these solutions. So there are a lot of assumptions that went into this, but there was a high level of confidence that, you know, a lake tap is essentially a tunnel. There's a lot of tunnel building capacity in Alaska. There were experts who had tunnel expertise from tunneling in the Alps. It is definitely a technology that is out there and exists. Part of the concern about the dam is also the soils in front of the glacier. Those are alluvial soils. They're very deep. They're extremely porous. So there's concerns of how the foundation that you would need for a dam and how deep those foundations would need to be so that you don't wind up with piping underneath a dam. Also, in terms of the operation and maintenance, a lake tap is the least complex of any of those options. That lake tap essentially is a gravity-fed tunnel. Very little in the ways of electrical or mechanical parts. It's really gravity fed versus a dam. A dam would, for example, need to have a spillway. It wouldn't serve as a reservoir. You wouldn't have the water in there all the time. You would have to essentially, it would be activated during times of a GLOF. A levee and flood walls, those are, I think one way of thinking about levees and flood walls are, you know, we're now all familiar with the Hesco barriers. We've seen what those look like. That is more similar to what a levee or flood walls would be like, but taller and with a complex drainage system that you would also need to operate. So next slide, please, Madam Clerk. Here's the other really important pieces of information that we were presented at the charrette. These are estimated contract costs. They're, the next column over is the contingency with a huge 50%. Part of the reason that number is so high in terms of that contingency is that these solutions are at a pretty early stage. You know, we don't have design. As you get further along with geotechnical and design, then the Army Corps would be better able to refine those costs. And they also, but you could see of all the options, the lake tap is estimated to be the least costly of the options. Also, they gave some preliminary design to construction completion. It also has the shortest estimated time for completion. And once again, it's the only option that does not require relocation of properties. Next slide, please. All right, suicide basin lake tap. I'm going to move through some of these next slides pretty quickly, but it gives you a sense of the alignment. There would be an intake in Suicide Basin. There would be a tunnel that's approximately 2.3 miles long. It would have an outfall that is between Nugget Falls and the face of the glacier. There's a lot of other information on this picture in terms of barge routes, staging areas, those sorts of things. I won't go into detail, but know once again, the Forest Service was present at this charrette. They have some other suggestions on potential areas for staging to make the construction maybe less impactful to residents and to the visitor industry. So I don't want to get too into details like staging areas and those sorts of things, but just know that those details are still yet to be hammered out. Next slide, please. Mainly, this is just to say that we've got a gravity-filled, this would drain via gravity. You go to the next slide, please. The main tunnel geometry, once again, there's that slope of 8%, so that's why it's a gravity driven system. The tunnel length, once again, a little, that 12,000 feet is a little, it's like about 2.3 miles. You've got an internal diameter of 10 feet, an external diameter of 13 feet. They picked that diameter because that's a diameter that could convey this approximately 800 cubic feet per second, which once again is pegged to the rate that the Suicide Basin is filling. On the right side, you see that there is a tunnel boring machine that is a particular mechanism that they had proposed to drill this tunnel. There would most likely be blasting at the inlet and the outlet, and then you use the tunnel boring machine. But how much of the tunnel would be completed via a tunnel boring machine versus drilling and blasting? It's really too early to know those things for sure. You would need to get geotechnical information, but that's the best sense at this point in time. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are just some pictures. The one on the right is an AI generated image, but that was a sense of what we think the tunnel would look like. The tunnel would mostly be maintained. Part of the reason there's a picture of a drone, a lot of the maintenance would be done by drone, but you would want to preserve some sort of walkway because people might have to get into the tunnel at some point in time. Next slide, please. I'm going to go much more quickly through the other alternatives, and people could ask questions after Ms. Kester is done. But I did want to include some substantive information in this packet on some of the other alternatives. There were two different dam alignments that USACE had proposed, but they are both really enormous dams. One is 2.4 miles long and one is 2.5 miles long. And they range anywhere from, 40 to 60 feet high. I mean, these are, this would be a massive, massive dam. It's almost hard to get your head around, but it would, properties would need to be purchased for this dam. There would be a lot of impacts for construction, during construction. There would be impacts after construction, major impacts to recreational opportunities, as well as how it would impact our crown jewel of tourism, people visiting the Mendenhall Glacier Recreation Area. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the dams were not envisioned to essentially serve as reservoirs. They would have spillways, and they would be designed for a peak release flow of 30,000 cubic feet per second, because that's the amount of water that it is based on history and projections for the future. We think the river can have that amount of water in it and not be destructive to homes. Next slide, please. This is just to give some pictures of what, when we talk about a levee or flood wall options. The levee has a broader footprint. Flood walls, there are eye walls, there are T-walls. They have a little bit less of a footprint themselves, but they still require a lot of space. If you go to the next slide, please. So the Army Corps, along with some of their experts from AECOM, one of those experts was a couple of them lived in the New Orleans area. They have a lot of experience with levees and flood walls. And part of the, I mean, a levee and flood wall, we're talking about, they're ranging between this 15 and 23 feet tall. So higher than our Hesco barriers in most places. Permanent, they require 150 foot to 225 foot right of way. As we know, people have built pretty close to the river. We don't have 150 foot right of ways, which is why there is a very high number on that table that I showed earlier, why there's a high number of relocations. The Army Corps and AECOM's perspective is that you would have to just buy a huge swath of homes that are on the riverbanks in order to install levees and flood walls. And they also require this complicated drainage infrastructure because we all know we live in a rainforest and we still need to move water from the dry side of those flood wall levees into the river. So next slide, please. And most of this information was information that was shared in the charrette. Some of it is a little bit updated from the Army Corps since that time. And I think I'm going to take this opportunity to hand the baton off to Deputy Director Nate Rumsey, and he's going to talk to you about flood fighting and Hescos.
Thank you, Director Koch. Deputy Director.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could you advance to the next slide, please? Although the phase one project and our EOC response was largely successful during the 2025 GLOF, we recognize the need to improve the performance of the barrier and take more proactive steps to deal with unanticipated seepage, overtopping, and breach conditions. Next slide, please. You've probably seen this footage. It was taken by a community member during the 2025 GLOF and shows one major debris strike the Hescos encountered during the 2025 GLOF. Although a barrier section with additional depth would have provided more protection from a debris strike, we were pretty fortunate that this did not occur at a lower lying, more developed area. Next slide, please. With that, Engineering and Public Works is focused on near-term flood fighting as a primary tool to protect the community. We must continue to assume large annual outburst events, and as Director Koch mentioned, we must assume we've not seen the worst of the flooding from a severity perspective so far. Next slide. After the 2025 GLOF, we realized we'd need to do repairs and reinforcements and some raising to the phase one barriers that we had installed. But with more awareness of the possible future flood severity and new modeling of the phase one and phase two alignments, we now realize we need to raise and reinforce the phase one barriers more extensively than we originally anticipated. Next slide, please. We've also been meeting regularly with the Army Corps of Engineers, PL 8499 team, to prepare for the phase two installation. The Army Corps has hired Sealaska Construction Solutions as their general contractor and is finalizing required documentation to issue the notice to proceed. The Army Corps and Sea Alaska will have project managers in Juneau for the duration of the Phase 2 installation, which is approximately twice the size of what we did during last year's Phase 1 project, at least from a length of protected riverfront perspective. Both projects are scheduled to commence by mid-March of this year, which is obviously weather dependent. And I'll now turn it over to Manager Kester to talk about next steps for the enduring solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director. I think that the presentation really underscores how impermanent those Hesco barriers are and how vulnerable they are. And that is certainly a position that we have maintained and will continue to maintain. So after the charrette and the selected alternative of a lake tap was chosen, Army Corps of Engineers hired AECom. AECom was on contract to inform a lot of the charrette information, basically gave them direction to work as quickly as possible to get as much information as they could to inform a technical report that's due in May of 2026. And this deadline is from Senator Sullivan, who is right now, in fact, on Wednesday, the Engineering and the Public Works Committee is being addressed by the Army Corps of Engineers as they put together the Water Resources and Development Act. So work was going, very quickly down that path. And we were under the impression that that was all going smoothly. We had regular check-ins with Army Corps of Engineers multiple times a week. A couple weeks ago, those check-ins ceased. And, we began inquiring, why haven't we had a check-in in a while? And then on Thursday of last week, we had a meeting with Army Corps headquarters where they rescinded all of the direction that they'd previously given to pursue a lake tap as the selected alternative, and basically said that they would continue to support flood fighting in the area for an undetermined amount of time. They directed staff to wrap up all efforts on the lake tap as the selected alternative, which included environmental work and feasibility and preliminary engineering on that. And their direction to their team was to continue to look at all 5 of the alternatives that you saw today and kind of wrap up a report that talked about all 5 of those different alternatives. Their focus in that brief meeting that we had with them was really on expanded flood fighting, flood walls, reinforcing those Hesco barriers, something stronger than Hesco barriers. I don't think that enough kind of time was they have not been able to put a lot of time into what that flood fighting looks like. I think, from our perspective, it looks a lot like a flood wall and a levee, which we already have seen a lot of the concerns, both from a budget and a right-of-way and timeline perspective. So it was a really disheartening pivot that left us a little bit speechless, and I imagine also leaves you speechless. They used words like, if there's ever an enduring solution, and put on a time frame of decades and not years. I can assure you that our immediate next outreach was to our Senator Sullivan, who remains committed to an enduring solution for the city and borough of Juneau. In fact, I've been on the phone with his staff today, and he has arranged a meeting with the Assistant Secretary's office on Wednesday of this week. We don't understand why this change. Certainly the price tag is sobering. Also, we don't have a lot of information. We don't have geotechnical information. It's a very preliminary. There are lots of people in our community who actually do this for a living, drilling tunnels. Now, not the same tunnel, not the same function, but who say it can be done for a lot less. So, I fully would anticipate a lower cost estimate once that engineering is able to be done. I've also been in touch with Senator Murkowski's office, who's committed to an enduring solution as well. And Congressman Begich has been briefed on this, and he has been a strong ally. I'm deeply frustrated with this change of course from Army Corps of Engineers. They certainly have been a great partner so far. It's been really, we need them. We need them to flood fight to keep this community safe and whole until we can get to an enduring solution. But we will be pushing very hard to pivot to get this train back on tracks to a lake tap. And so I guess if I could ask anything of the listening public, and I know you don't know all the engineering and all the details of the lake tap and why it was selected. And frankly, I can't share all of those with you because I don't understand them all either. Our engineers and Public Works Department that spent 3 days in that charrette with 90 people ranging for experts from all over the world, they're going to know a lot more. But really, the Army Corps is the expert, and frankly, they're not sharing a lot of information with us at this time. But I think that, the call to action that I would ask is to advocate for a lake tap. This community needs to be very singularly focused and together on what we need and demand for the survival of our community. And I think that this is the time where we pull together and have one voice. So that would be my request as we deal with this information. I also want to let you know that, my conversations are ongoing. Our conversations with Army Corps are ongoing. Most importantly, our delegation, they're going to be key players in this, and they are on our team, and they are on the team City and Borough of Juneau. So we just need to figure out how we can help them. And I think the more that we can align as a community, the more helpful, the easier it will be for them to advocate for us. So with that, we are happy to answer any questions on the magnitude of information that was shared with you tonight.
Who has questions? Everybody's in a state of shock. Ms. Atkinson.
Just so I can restate what you just said at the end there. The Army Corps, which has presented a aggressive and very welcome timeline that has agreed to fund and help install phase 2 of the Hesco barriers, out of nowhere last week reached out and said, we don't even know if we'll support an enduring solution.
I would reframe that because I know that that they were very careful to say that they are still supportive of an enduring solution and will put work into looking at all 5 alternatives. But certainly the aggressive timeline that we were on last week or beginning of last week seems to be something that they're not comfortable with.
Follow up, Ms. Atkinson.
So they backtracked. That's what happened?
I think that
Yes.
would be
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure it changes, the dynamics of the agreement set in place, but if the initial plan is to still do full funding or, majority funding of the phase 2, if we decided to support some sort of levee dam hybrid, can we work that in as phase 2 and get some of the funding allocated for some of these higher cost things?
Madam Manager.
I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but I will tell you what I have been briefed on. And that is that the Army Corps sees as a midterm solution, so they're calling it a midterm solution, aggressive flood fighting, which does look like the levee option to a certain extent. Obviously not permanent, because that would be a much, much bigger, more expensive project. Their preliminary cost estimates were about $30 million a year for the installation and then maintenance. And that was only for the first couple of years. They didn't have any of that further down. So I can't tell the future. Maybe that we'd experience another year and the recommendation would evolve. That's one of the challenges that we have with this event, right? It's unpredictable. And I guarantee you that if we have a catastrophic event, we'll get more attention and people will say, hey, you're right. This really is a giant problem for your community. And frankly, I don't want that to have to happen because I don't want our community to have to suffer to get that level of attention. But certainly it has been fluid. So I can't guarantee one way or another.
But just to follow up on that, phase 2, though, right now is Hesco barriers down the rest of the occupied river.
Thank you. You are correct. And phase 2 is Hesco barriers. And when Army Corps talks about continuing to support that, they talk about more resilient flood fighting measures, of which I don't have details.
Thank you for that. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that chunk of information to all staff. Madam Manager, an understanding that there's a lot of information that is dynamic and changing and you are still getting, and that that the Corps has been a good partner. We want to continue to be good partners. We still look for their support for the flood fighting. Do you have any sense, in your call to action, it sounds like it would be beneficial if the community is saying with one voice that, we want our enduring solution and we want it now, or we want it as fast as we can have it. It's been my experience in speaking with constituents throughout this entire process. Some people kind of got married to some of the, there's been a lot of things that we've talked about, for instance, a levy being one of them. I know some people in the community really got attached to the idea of a levy and have continued to push the idea of the levy throughout. Do you have any sense that because we are not united as a community, that perhaps because they are picking up on community division in what that solution looks like, that is potentially part of it? I mean, that's somewhat asking you to take your best guess, but could you speak to that?
Thank you. I think that it certainly doesn't help our position to have a divided community on what the best option is, because we are asking for so much so quickly, and something that's so different than the Army Corps process, right? They want to study this for 3 years precisely for very good reasons, right? So I think that in so much as there's dissension within the community on what an option is, it does not help. That being said, I have been in conversations with lots of our community members who have lots of investment and expertise, in this area, and I'm confident that we are all advocating for a solution. I guess a pivot of this nature, I think, is too large for a little bit of questioning constituents to have derailed the train to this extent, is my assessment of the situation. So yes, we need to be aligned, and it doesn't help when we're unaligned, but we're not that unaligned. Everyone in this room, everyone who has, written their delegation and talked to their delegation wants an enduring solution and wants it quickly. And I've never heard anyone advocate for anything other than that. So I think we can do a better job at marching all to the beat of one drummer, which is very difficult for our very engaged and creative community. But I don't put the pivot squarely on the feet of internal dissension. I really don't know what it is about. I'm hoping to learn more on Wednesday.
Okay, thanks.
And Madam Manager, I don't think you talked about Wednesday.
I'm sorry, Wednesday, I and Senator Sullivan's office have a meeting with the Assistant Secretary of the Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works, and that will be where I can ask some of these questions on the why.
Ms. Walt.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I think the other shocking part of this evening so far was where we started, which is maybe I had seen those numbers before in my packet, but I hadn't really contemplated the scale of potential flooding that was presented tonight. And at some point, it would be helpful to get back into that science, because I feel like we have been there with the flood maps, and then we brought in USGS and Weather Service, and we looked at the curves, and we talked about the push and pull of the ice gets thinner and the basin gets deeper. And the icebergs melt. So a better understanding of when all, a new group of experts came into the room and they looked at their worst case scenario, like as a policy maker, I need to like have some sense of, okay, what's most severe but unlikely and what's more likely but less severe. When you guys got that new information, did it change your impression of how we should be dealing, especially in the short term as a community? Because I think that's a lot different scenario than we were in a few weeks ago in terms of the worst case scenario of flooding.
Who wants to tackle that one? Mr. Barr.
Thank you for the question through the chair. A couple of things. So I think the first thing I would just note is to reinforce what Deputy Director Rumsey said earlier about needing to bolster the phase one work that we did more than we thought we needed to bolster it by. When we installed phase one last year, we went into that believing that we were installing with some cushion, right? With some room between where the likely top of a GLOF event would be and the top of the barriers. And that wasn't the case. We didn't really have any cushion. So that was kind of one piece of data that informed that. And then these data kind of further reinforced that need to flood fight that. I would say, though, that there really isn't a short-term way to address 89,000 or 118,000 CFS. Only an enduring solution can do that. So we are, I guess I'd say all that just to note that, or just to emphasize Deputy Director Rumsey's point that we are coordinating as closely with the Army Corps and their flood fighting team, which is a different team than the team that Manager Kester was referring to from our meeting on Thursday, to do as by the science of a job as we can when it comes to reinforcing a phase one, installation of phase two, and all of that short-term work.
Follow up?
Quick follow-up. And what about like emergency response? Does that alter your, I know we're trying to do everything we can to protect property and lives, so I don't know that changes anything to see that, but curious if that you had that reaction.
Yes, we certainly had that reaction. I agree with your, that it doesn't really change a lot. I mean, it provides us more information, more data. I guess I'll just offer one of the things that is most challenging when we look at this data to understand, and I think you probably share this challenge, I would imagine, as a policymaker, that and our scientists talked about this the last time we dove into the science, is that we're on a curve and we don't know where on that curve we're at. We don't know if we're close to the top of that curve and are seeing our larger events now, or if we're at the bottom of that curve and we have many larger events ahead of us. And that is maybe the most frustrating point of the data, is it's really challenging to know where we're at and what to predict and expect. We, of course, have our last 3 years of data. We have that trend. Director Koch talked about that and about how that trend really cannot be relied on for year-to-year data. It's more of like a long-term thing. But I think that's what I have.
Madam Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to add, I know that the numbers are sobering, and we certainly hope and expect that volume to be very unlikely. But because you're sitting up here at this dais, that you have a unique responsibility to inform and plan for the worst when you're given that information. And it's really, it's a sobering responsibility, right? I mean, chances are they're planning for a 500-year GLOF on top of a 500-year rain event, on top of all of these other things to come up with these numbers, right? So we can sit here and be like, highly unlikely, but you have the responsibility and Army Corps has the responsibility to take into consideration that worst case scenario. So I just want to offer that as a qualifier to that data.
Anything further?
Madam Mayor.
Brooks? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Barr.
Madam Mayor, if I just may to address Assemblymember Wall's question from an emergency management perspective, I just want to remind folks and emphasize that when we get into actual GLOF events, so we're talking about long-term planning here, but when we get into the actual emergency management, the data and understanding of what is likely is much more known, right? So we won't be faced with that question of a GLOF is weeks out. Is it going to be a 50,000 CFS event, an 80,000 CFS event, or an 120,000 CFS event? We will be much more able to plan and communicate those expectations, thanks to the good work that our partners do at USGS and National Weather Service and those folks. So I know that's not like great reassurance, but I think that's just important information from an emergency response perspective.
Mr. Brooks, and then Ms. Hall, do you have your hand up? No, okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems like regardless of whatever avenue we choose or go down for a path, there's still going to need to be a substantial amount of geotech work and other like things. And, it seems like a lot of these projections are assumptions, and they're assuming for the worst case scenario. And if this geotech can help get that more refined or put things in a better perspective, I mean, leaving it up to the Army Corps to do all the geotech could be, a substantial amount of time, but we definitely have the local expertise and ability to be able to do some of that work. So is that something that would need to be discussed at the Wednesday meeting as far as getting, a conditional use to allow some local expertise to go and do some of the legwork for them so that when the Army Corps is ready to break ground on the enduring solution, the site's prepped?
Madam Manager.
Thank you for bringing up geotech, because that is our very next step and working towards a lake tap. We have a congressionally directed spending request for $6 million to do geotechnical work for the lake tap. Geotech is an interesting science. You could spend almost an endless amount of money drilling down every 12-inch square of property, right, that you to understand the soils underneath it. So it ends up being a very expensive part of the project, which is why it's important to have a selected alternative before engaging in that geotechnical work, because it takes a lot of resources. But you're absolutely right that that's the next step, and that information will deeply inform the Army Corps' work should they proceed on a selected alternative. As far as CBJ taking on that geotech work ourselves, I think that there may be a time when we need to have that conversation and what that looks like holistically. I certainly am not ready to have that conversation right now. What does it mean to go at it alone? I do think that, we are in the circumstance often with federal agencies that if they haven't done the work that they want per their specifications, per their alignment, it's not that useful. So that would be another challenge. But, the way you're thinking might very well be a conversation, but I think we want to get this train back on its tracks before we explore what going at it alone looks like.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Manager Kester, I know you're going to learn more this week, but, in terms of your call to action, right now we, feel confident our delegation is, with us and on our team. Do you have guidance on who, if folks heard this news and want to take action, who they direct that to, or is that still a bit of a moving target?
Thank you for that question. I mean, I do think that the delegation is the audience because the Army Corps will be influenced by what they say. I would encourage our comments to be, organized and CC the city so that we can also collect those, a sign-on letter or a resolution or something that just limits gets our message across, but limits just the amount of time and effort that the delegation and their staff have to kind of process all of this. And because they get the calls, they are the staff at the delegation's office, Senator Sullivan, Senator Murkowski, Congressman Begich. I mean, they get it. It just will give them tools and know that our community supports them.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two parts of this is the plan to still is like the Army Corps still planning to 100% cover phase 2, and then how much are the damage estimates up to for phase 1?
Madam Manager.
Yeah, thank you for that question. They are 100% covering phase 2, and we do have a signed agreement for that. But you bring up a really good point. Like, we need the Army Corps. Like, we absolutely need them because flood fighting is going to be so essential. No matter how long an enduring solution takes. So caring for that relationship is really important. Which means we do need to approach kind of our advocacy carefully. As far as the cost estimate for repairs to phase 1, Deputy Director, do you have a updated cost estimate on that?
Thank you, Madam Manager. We are just still getting, I guess I would say, the latest data on how this new information about flood severity may impact the required configuration for the phase 1 and phase 2 alignments of Hesco barriers within the last week. But we have had some conversations with our identified contractors that we'll likely be working with for the phase 1 repairs and raising. We do anticipate that the labor burden for that project could be 3 to 4 times what it was for the phase 1 installation. I'm not saying that it's going to cost 3 to 4 times because there won't be as much material involved, but it will be a more intensive project. After the 2025 GLOF, we anticipated that would be approximately $1 million in maintenance costs, but it's going to be a lot more work than that because in order to raise and reinforce the phase 1 Hesco alignment, there are many cases where we'll have to remove sections of barrier and completely reconstruct them. If you looked at some of the photos even that we had in the presentation today, areas where we experience seepage, we'll have to go back and repair the base for those barriers as well. So I don't have a direct answer to the question other than we anticipate that it will be closer in magnitude to the phase 1 installation cost. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. And just to the manager's comments about going at it alone and being careful about, harboring this partnership. I'm not trying to hint or give any inkling that we should separate from that. I want to be as symbiotic as possible and make sure that if there's any opportunity for community members or CBJ to help the Army Corps do some of the mediocre work or, is like less important stuff to them to help their process go a lot smoother. If that's anything that we can offer up and help with, we should be exploring those avenues.
Thank you for that. And I know that we've had a couple minor studies done in town by either NOAA or UAS that they said they could use, but they were just minor studies, right?
Yeah, thank you. We have connected Army Corps with NOAA. University of Alaska Southeast is working on the project. We've also connected them with our mining community, who are experts in this. So continuing to try to connect them with those resources and appreciate the public's willingness to engage in that.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I think a lot of the success that we've seen so far in this has come not from going it alone, but also like going with our partnership with the tribes and how we declared that joint emergency. I'm wondering where I guess I'm wondering if they are still, if we're still kind of working together in that partnership, and then like maybe is there a possibility of expanding that partnership to the state, who is also somewhat invested in, and this is the state capital and.
Madam Manager.
Thank you. We have briefed President Peterson and his team on this, and the Tlingit and Haida is standing by to continue that partnership. You had another point, not just the Tlingit and Haida state and the state, and of course, the state has been very responsive to our needs during a disaster and disaster declarations. They have a lot harder time, being proactive just from a funding scenario. I mean, their disaster assistance fund is underfunded right now. So that's just a bigger challenge from a resources perspective, but certainly the state is, an advocate and a partner as much as they can be.
Anything further? All right, seeing nothing, let's take 10 minutes, and if anybody's in the audience wants to ask questions, you certainly can to the staff. We'll bring us back to order. Item 2, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. NRCS EWP Program and View Drive Resident Interest.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and I think Director Koch was taking this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to take a moment to say that this is another really difficult topic that I'm going to cover. It's, in both of these presentations that I'm giving, we're really talking about people's lives and their homes. And it's, I just want to honor and respect the gravity of that situation and how this is all really difficult for everybody involved. Now, for this topic, we're narrowing the focus down from the potential impacts of inundation to the entire valley from this maximum GLOF to talk specifically about the Natural Resources Conservation Services Emergency Watershed Program. I want to just remind the Assembly and folks in this room that we do have Brett Nelson from NRCS. He's also available if we get some detailed programmatic questions. But he gave a pretty detailed presentation at the October 30th Committee of the Whole. And just to bring us up to date on where we are, we CBJ had requested to participate in this program. NRCS and that was non-binding a request. NRCS came out this summer in the July time period, and they said that View Drive would be a candidate for their EWP program, their buyout program, I'll refer to it as. And they had done some preliminary work on a damage survey report and came up with this total project cost of $25 million. A project is more than just the cost of the homes themselves. There's environmental assessment, there's demolition, and there's restoration. You have to, once properties go into this sort of buyout program, that is permanent. That is, they'll stay in essentially conservation easement for perpetuity. The program, as offered by the federal government, this program, they cover 75% of many of the costs of the majority of the costs of the program. There is a 25% non-federal cost share. After the October 30th detailed presentation by Mr. Nelson, CBJ requested a waiver of that 25% cost share. That was not granted. Then after the Assembly had some additional discussion at the Finance Committee meeting, they directed staff to do an informal poll, so it's non-binding, but just to get a sense from the residents who live on that road, if they would be willing and interested to participate in this program, if they had to pay the 25% non-federal cost share, or if they would not be interested in participating in the program. We had, pretty good response rate in terms of, we got responses from 14 out of the 18 properties. You can see in this very short table, most of the respondents said that they would not be interested in participating under those circumstances. There was one property owner that I had listed as unclear. They selected yes and no, and they indicated that they would need more information in order to make an informed decision. Of the two yeses, one is a property that has been subject to severe and repetitive flooding. The other is a property that is on the high side and has not flooded. And as you may recall, Mr. Nelson had talked previously about, because we didn't know how many, you never know ultimately how many participants will choose to participate in this sort of program, because it is a voluntary program. It still needs to satisfy the objectives of the NRCS program. And so mainly they're looking to mitigate against this severe and repetitive loss. So there could be, for example, instances of if there were 4 houses in a row and 3 of them have been flooded, but 1 of them hadn't, because it's a little bit higher in that particular area. But the 1 house that was in the middle of the others wanted to participate, that would probably satisfy NRCS in terms of they would allow for that house that had not been flooded to participate because it was in the middle or adjacent to homes that had been subject to repetitive flooding. In this instance, the 2 homeowners who indicated in this informal way that they would be interested in participating are pretty far apart. And although NRCS has not made a formal decision, it is likely that they would only cover the home that has been subject to that severe and repetitive flooding. So it is possible that there could just be 1 entity that participates in the program. In terms of some other things to keep in mind for NRCS, the local office received this funding from the federal government back in November. The whole project is supposed to be completed, including, demolition and restoring properties to their, close to their natural state in 220 days. That is, not going to happen at this point. That gets us into the May timeframe. There is the possibility of getting an extension that is likely to be approved. But NRCS would, at minimum, require CBJ, if we were to participate in this program, to get those homeowners who want to participate out of their homes prior to the 2026 GLOF. So you'd have to have agreements in place to purchase a home or homes, depending on how many participants there are. And they would have to vacate the property, and we would have to secure any hazards. I'm thinking about things like a fuel oil tank or those sorts of things, so that there aren't spills. In some, I also provided some of the a little bit of a distillation of some of the comments that we received with both on the informal ballads and through individual, conversations that we had with people. A major theme was a real disappointment that CBJ would require individual property owners to pay a 25% cost share, or just that some people said that they didn't have the ability to pay for that 25% cost share, or if they had to, if they had that amount of money, they might use it in other ways to, protect their homes versus participating in a buyout program. I think some things that are important for this assembly to keep in mind would be potential next steps. If CBJ were to participate in this program, we would sign an agreement with NRCS. Then the next steps would be, there would be a formal and binding process where CBJ would have to ask the View Drive residents if they were interested in participating or not. If they said they were not interested in participating, that would be the end of that road. If they were interested in participating, they still have one other off-ramp, and that would be at the point at which we get an appraisal for the property. there would be a negotiation between CBJ and the individual property owners on what that property's value is. And that is another area where individual property owners could say, I disagree with that appraised value and I don't want to participate. That's another sort of off-ramp for individual participants. It is important to also know that even if CBJ isn't paying the 25% non-federal cost share, that there are still costs associated with project management for these projects. Some of those costs are partially reimbursable. Some of those costs are ineligible for reimbursement. Mr. Nelson corrected one item that I had on this memo. The permitting efforts are not eligible for reimbursement. The cost per property, the CBJ cost per property outside of that 25% non-federal cost share are scalable. It depends on the leading cost driver of a project per parcel is not surprisingly the cost of the home. So for homes that are more expensive, the project is more expensive and the project management is generally a percentage of the overall project. So the CBJ portion, a non-reimbursable portion would be higher. But we are talking about tens of thousands of dollars per property of CBJ, likely CBJ costs that are not, wouldn't be reimbursable under the program. And then also, I just reminded everyone that the CBJ contribution to the lid is maxed out for people in the phase 1 Hesco lid is maxed out at $10,000, just to kind of put all the dollar numbers out there. And what we're looking for from the staff perspective is to understand from the assembly if there's additional information that you need in order to help make a decision as to whether CBJ should participate in this program or not. We do ask that, we do have this essentially time is of the essence problem again. If we're going to proceed with this project, we have to get people out of their homes before August of 2026. And that's really not that far away. I think that's what I've got.
Thank you, Director Koch, for another great, good news session. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Did you get the impression, I think it's beneficial that we got comments along with our votes. Did you get the impression that if there was some other way for us to get the 25%, that more people would be on board with the buyout?
Through the chair to Mr. Kelly, we definitely heard from people that there were some people who just said we cannot afford that 25% non-federal cost share. And there was some desire by a number of individuals for CBJ to pay some portion of that 25%.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to ask maybe Mr. Kelly's question slightly different, or maybe I misinterpreted his question, but if there, one of the frustrating things I think about this project is there probably is a solution out there. Like you could bring partners together to figure out, there's enough interested parties, I think, city, homeowners, our community, the state, nonprofits, there are lots of folks who may want to see this come to fruition, but we don't have time, or we haven't gotten there yet. But that still requires the homeowners to want to take a buyout. So if there was a solution to come up with the 25%, we know CBJ can't cover it. Sounds like the homeowners don't want to cover it or can't cover it either. But if there was a solution, do people even want it? Did you get that sense? And, this is a hard way to communicate with people So I'll also take that feedback from residents when they email me afterwards.
Director Koch.
Thank you through the chair to Ms. Wall. That is a little bit harder for me to answer. There were some people who it did seem like they were indicating that they might be more open to participating in the program if they did not have to pay for that 25%. However, we haven't identified a non-CBJ source of that 25% non-federal cost share. So I think there's not any other funding source that we are aware of right now that could, other than CBJ, fill that 25% gap, either CBJ or the homeowner or some combination of CBJ and the homeowner.
Mr. Brooks and then Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The program by itself seems like an extremely useful tool that honestly could be applied to any number of, the potential disasters that we have in the community, whether that be landslides, avalanches, this is definitely a tool that can be and should be utilized at some point. And especially for the people who have the inundation and need it and want to utilize it. As far as the 25%, it is very hard to ask people to walk away from their life investment at a loss. Is there a way, instead of monetarily having the city come up with the 25%, is there a potential doing a partial land swap to make up that other value and proposing that to the residents who are interested in the program?
Director Koch.
Through the chair to Mr. Brooks, I agree with you in terms of, this is such a difficult question that we're asking the residents of View Drive to weigh in on. And we all know that how special and important your home is to you. And this is just probably one of the most challenging decisions that anyone would ever have to face. And my sincere, my heart goes out to the residents of View Drive. In terms of your question about, land swap, and I think you're getting to a question about in-kind, sort of, would that count as a contribution? I might have to phone a friend and ask Mr. Nelson, who I believe has been elevated as a panelist, if land counts as an in-kind contribution towards that 25%. Mr. Nelson, are you there? Mr. Nelson, if you, I'm not sure, were you able to hear that question? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. We could see you now, but we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yep, you got it. Did you hear the
Okay.
question about land swap, and did you hear that context?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And I guess the first part of the response is in-kind is certainly an allowable contribution. Often on projects, it might be hard to come up with something that would be suitable as in-kind. I can't picture in my mind how a land swap would fulfill that. I'm not saying it doesn't, but more commonly, and this isn't the case at all with like View Drive, but like if we were doing a riverbank stabilization project and the city owned a quarry and the rock was valued at $20 a yard, and the city was going to donate that rock, that's something we could consider as in kind. If the city had a fleet of equipment and they were going to undertake the demolition with your own equipment and your own manpower, we can come to an agreement on the value of that, and that can be in kind. Those are some examples. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
All right, we have Ms. Hall, sorry, Ms. Hall, Mr. Steininger, and then Ms. Hughes Candies.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and Director Cook. I know with, early on, there was a community meeting with the members of U Drive over at the fire hall, really well attended. I'm wondering if there's been any other opportunities to come together. I know some of my feedback is this has been incredibly confusing to kind of sort through, going back through all the meeting minutes and so yeah, I guess that's is there an opportunity to sit down and lay this all out, answer their questions in a little more informal setting?
And Ms. Hall's volunteering to go to that meeting.
Sure.
Through the chair, to Ms. Hall, yes, I mean, I understand that feedback, and that is legitimate. The folks on View Drive they've been organized. They're easy to talk to. We had that conversation at the fire hall, and we're happy to continue to have that sort of conversation. Part of the challenge is that we continue to learn about all the aspects of the program, and we're kind of learning as we go. And trying to share as much information as we have, but it has been evolving while our engineering and public works staff are also working on all the other Hesco and enduring solution pieces. So it's just been a little bit of trying to move all those pieces forward simultaneously. But the View Drive folks have been great to work with. We can certainly organize something to have another conversation.
Thank you for that. Mr. Steininger.
Thank you. And I'm thinking about if we moved forward with just the one respondent who, responded yes and has an impacted property, all the kind of extra costs, the administrative costs, technical assistance pieces, all those costs would then fall on just a single homeowner as part of their, 25% share. Is it even viable at that point, I guess, to move forward with a single homeowner?
Through the chair to Mr. Steininger, it is allowable. We had that conversation with NRCS. It is allowable to proceed with a project that just has one eligible buyout property. You are correct, though. You certainly don't get any economies of scale when you are doing all that work for one property. I just think about a specific example of we still have to hire an appraiser, and we have to do the same procurement process to hire an appraiser, whether they are appraising one house or they're appraising 15 houses. So you do lose some of that economy of scale when you're just talking about a individual property. I will mention that what I've learned in talking with Mr. Nelson is that the way that this buyout program is typically applied, it is typically applied in a pretty different sort of situation. And by that, I mean, they are typically buying out like hundreds of homes. The homes are generally not as expensive as the homes that we're talking about. And they're just, buying out a swath of a floodplain and returning a contiguous area back to a natural state. So it is a little unusual to do a patchwork and to even have a project that's, has a max that's less than 20 participants.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Or did you get your question answered?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. My question was about whether we could do just one, but I'm going to take the opportunity and ask a little bit not directly tied to the memo question, because I wasn't here at the presentation. I've gone back, but just to make sure I'm thinking about this the right way, if someone said, yes, I'm interested, but I don't have that cash available, the cash would need to be available. It couldn't be tied up in the asset of their home. It couldn't be measured by appreciation of their house. Is that correct? My 25% as a homeowner would need to be in a bank account where I could write it into a check. Is that accurate to say?
Through the chair to Ms. Hughes Candies, we would have to figure out the mechanism for if it were a case that CBJ wanted to participate, but the decision was made that the 25% non-federal cost share was solely borne by property owners.
Right.
We would have to figure out a mechanism to get their 25%. It could be it potentially could be something in escrow or some other sort of mechanism. We cannot just take their 25% non-federal cost share off of essentially reduce
Right.
the reimbursement
So it's gotta be real money.
Would have to, and I did ask NRCS if they had any examples of how other communities had, had ever handled that, if there was some sort of standard template. And they didn't have any standard advice, and said that would be really just something that we'd have to figure out locally, as long as it complied with all local, state, and federal rules. They would be fine with it.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. I guess this question might verge a little bit towards more of a comment, but I guess before I make any sort of comment, I think I would want to know if it's helpful. And so this is the question I would be asking staff is, would it be helpful for us to give direction that perhaps we would want to think of more creative solutions like some sort of in-kind contribution, or like I realize we've already looked at some local grant opportunities and haven't really been successful, but maybe would it be helpful for the assembly to say that we would like staff to expand that search, maybe reach out to services that we have available through Alaska Municipal League, or check out things like I heard recently at a conference that even though the Denali Commission is technically like that, their funds are technically federal money, but don't count as federal money for most projects. Maybe checking that way. Would there, I guess, so my question is, would it be helpful for us to give you direction to look for creative solutions and possibly more grant opportunities?
Madam Manager, you want to jump in here?
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that, that desire. And I would say if we had a year or 6 months even, and you said, this is your highest priority, city manager, and you need to invest resources in looking for grants, pursuing interesting partnerships, and mechanisms through which to align those different interests, whether they be nonprofit or state. And you gave me that direction and said, I want you to deprioritize other things that you're working on, because this should take your political capital and this should take your creative thought. Then I think with time, I think we would certainly give it a solid try. I think it's very difficult with the short time frame. Remember, these are funds that are available to us because of the federal disaster declaration that need to be obligated fairly quickly for us to take advantage of it. And we just have not had the bandwidth to make coming up with some creative solution and to bring all those partners together to fit that bill. And so I think it would be difficult.
Yep, and I'll just add on to that. That's one of the reasons we did the informal poll, was just to get an idea how many people were actually interested, to see if we wanted to spend staff time. So having just one property kind of clouds the picture just a little bit. I'll ask a quick question. So if we did do this program with the one property, do we have to do anything to that property to make sure it getting flooded doesn't affect the rest of the neighborhood? Or do we just turn it into a park and then wash our hands of it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there are two parts to that. I don't think that NRCS is going to require us to do anything to that property to ensure that that one property doesn't cause damage to other properties. However, I think that we will have, liability associated with owning one property, and could potentially have risks associated with, or need to invest additional funds to ensure that that one property that we purchased wouldn't cause damage to other properties. We had asked a similar question to NRCS, and that goes back to, there was a little bit of head scratching because they're like, oh, usually we like buy out whole tracts and whole blocks, and we're not used to this patchwork of like one of 18 houses, just buying that one particular house. So that's a little bit, it's pretty unusual for NRCS, but I think probably our liability is just more on our liability side versus NRCS requirements to participate in the program.
All right, thank you for that. Ms. Uscandies.
Thanks. I'm just looking for clarification on that. It's hard for me to see how, if we had one person and there was no longer a house there, how we're creating a liability to the other homes.
Through the chair to Ms. Hughes, Scandies, this particular home that is interested in participating and would be a good candidate according to NRCS, the concern is that we know it's repetitively flooded, and whereas potentially the private property owner, could hold some liability from adjacent property owners, just potentially the calculus is different in terms of people's willingness to hold CBJ accountable for liability versus their neighbor. But it is a property that repeatedly floods, and water can get from their property to other people's property.
Okay. I still have a hard time seeing how you'd make that case. I understand that you'd be more likely to sue a city than a neighbor, but thanks.
Mr. Burks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just kind of revisiting the land swap a little bit, not necessarily as a method of in-kind, but as a method for financing the other 25%. What if people who were interested in a program like this could get a city loan to purchase a parcel of land equal to that 25% value? And then that way the city could put up the money immediately while getting repaid over time by the person who's partaking in the program.
Madam Manager.
We have not explored any mechanisms like that or any available parcels. So I can't answer what that program would look like because we haven't looked into it.
Mr. Steininger, lean forward. You're asking the question.
And I think I've asked this before in a previous presentation on this topic, but just to confirm, and I know we just got very bad news on this subject, but our preferred alternative for the enduring solution, the lake tap, that would sufficiently protect all the properties on View Drive that are currently subject to flooding. Is that correct?
You are correct.
That's one of the reasons we were pursuing it so heavily. So, and I think you've answered this question before also, but I know yeah, kudos to the neighborhood. I just want to say you guys have been excellent to work with and been very patient with us, trying to muddle our way through this when it's kind of unprecedented for us. So appreciate the neighborhood. But some of them have put up Hesco barriers. Is that still not an avenue for us to help or just give them Hesco barriers and say, go forth and put them up yourself? Or where are we with that plan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had previously explored some of those questions with the Army Corps. They have been clear that for the Hesco barriers that they have provided to CBJ, we can't give those to private citizens. In terms of using Hesco barriers to protect View Drive, both our own engineers and Army Corps engineers have looked at View Drive and have found that it is not a good candidate to be protected by Hesco barriers. Those Hesco barriers would have to be 20 to 25 feet high, and it would be more of almost an encirclement versus in the rest of the river where you're really, in some ways, it's a form of levee where you're just helping the water to continue to go pass down the river, but it would be a different situation. And we still don't think Hescos are a good fit for View Drive, and neither does the Army Corps.
Yep, I knew that we couldn't do the whole neighborhood, but I know that some of the neighbors are just doing kind of, like you said, putting a moat around their house, so. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? Ms. Hall?
Just wanted to, and thank you, Madam Mayor, Director Kochka. I just wanted to clarify, so the 25% that they would come up with, in addition to that, the city would be coming up with the technical assistance that is about 15%, and only about half of that could be reimbursed. So about how much would that be per property, or do we know that?
Through the chair to Ms. Hall, it depends on the cost of the property, but that's where we estimated a range of anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 in terms of non-reimbursable costs per property.
Go ahead, Ms. Hall.
And these would not be borne by the property owner. Those costs would be, the 25% is what, yeah, could you explain that a little bit?
Yes, through the chair to Ms. Hall, those costs in this memo, when I talk about $50,000 to $100,000, that's non-reimbursable. That is above and beyond the 25% non-federal cost share. So in some ways, you've got three buckets. One is that 75%, the majority is being paid for by the federal government at the 75%. Then the 25% is the non-federal cost share. And NRCS doesn't necessarily care who covers that 25%. It just can't be federal money. That's one bucket of costs. And then in addition to that is this project management cost. That's a portion of which that is not eligible for reimbursement.
Got that? Ms. Wall, I'm gonna go to you and see if you have something for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a tough one in terms of what we do next. I mean, I think the recommendation was to talk about what more information we need. I heard some of that. Maybe we can surface others offline. But I think the only idea that I heard of real action coming out of the body, and I'll make this motion, is to direct staff to host a neighborhood meeting. And if I could speak to my motion.
Go ahead.
This is a tough one. I appreciate the informal poll. We got some information here, and maybe this is simple as this is dead in the water. No one wants to do this. CBJ can't pay that 25%. I think that's what we decided when we asked for this poll. And the homeowners can't either. But what I'm curious about is as Ms. Hall said, this is very confusing. It took us a long time in our last meeting to understand what we were grappling with. I'd feel more comfortable knowing, I'd feel more comfortable that we were going down the right path if there was a bit more of an informal conversation.
Fair enough. So we have a motion. Is any objection? You looked like you were going to say something, Mr. Steiniger. All right, so not great news for the neighborhood, I know, but we're just not quite sure what to do with you. I'll be flat out honest. Mr. Brooks. Oh, seeing, unless you're objecting. Go ahead.
I would like to object just because of the outreach from some of the View Drive residents, especially ones who were involved with discovering this program and suggesting it. They felt like, you know, the community engagement and neighborhood meetings that they've had in the past haven't led to results that, you know, were intended or that they felt were in the best interest of the needs of that specific street. So could it, you know, potentially be a joint meeting of the neighborhood with some assembly members?
Yeah, certainly the staff can invite a couple of us, so,
I'll remove my objection.
okay. Actually, Mr. Brook, that was the plan. The staff just didn't know that yet. So I already volunteered Ms. Hall. All right, go ahead. And
Oh,
Ms.
just to clarify, my intent was for this not to be a public meeting, in a public assembly meeting, but certainly with with the neighborhood, with staff and with 3 or less assembly members.
That sounds good. So any objection to that? Seeing none, we'll work with staff to make sure we can get that scheduled. So thank you guys for being here tonight from View Drive. Keep going or you need a break? Oh, all of our topics are long.
Madam Mayor, I would love dearly to stay on for the next topic, but it is midnight 13 here, so I'm gonna have to bid you all adieu.
All right.
just
Thank you
noticing
and
that.
do good work back there.
Okay.
All right. So the rest of the body, a break, 5-minute break. 5 minutes. Keep to your 5 minutes. will bring us back into session. Item number 3, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Telephone Hill RFQ input.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this agenda topic is to update you on the work that staff has been doing on Telephone Hill, but also give you an opportunity to provide input on what the highest priorities are for a request for qualifications, which is another way of saying request for proposals for development of Telephone Hill. We want to make sure that before we hire someone to draft this RFQ, we know exactly from you all what are the highest priorities. So I'll just start with a little bit of a status update. We have had a number of eviction cases take longer than we had anticipated. So we still have one occupied property up there until February 28th. After that, we'll be able to do testing of the home and then complete a plan set for demolition. So just as soon as we get that information, we will give that to the designer, who then will be able to design a bid package, and we will put bid for demolition out. You will see in the packet a list of the different materials that are that have been found on the site. That, in addition to the condition assessment, kind of inform that process. In the meantime, we have been working with Leland Consulting on some preliminary developer outreach. That also is included in your packet. They spoke with 9 different developers and 13 different individuals. A lot of really good information in there as far as like what a potential developer would be looking for, what some of their desires are, but there's some big themes. The first theme is a flexible process, and that's where the request for qualifications process comes in instead of a request for proposals. And the difference, you know, they're both mechanisms for gauging interest and awarding bids, but the request for qualifications really emphasizes a bidder's performance history, their ability to get the job done, and is more flexible to be able to come up with a creative response to, again, the highest priorities for the assembly in that RFQ process. It's important to note that this is not like a bid, a traditional procurement process where we design something and then ask, you know, a bunch of different contractors to tell us how much it would cost, because remember, we're not paying for this. Our product that we want is not cost-based. It's based on a desired outcome and a level of incentives that we are willing to provide. The other item that developers said that was going to be really important is to be explicit in what incentives we're willing to provide. So that's another question that I posed for you in this memo. Our range of incentives are from providing the land at a no cost, delayed purchase, tax abatement. It would be eligible for tax abatement, reserving some funds from the affordable housing fund for this project, either in a grant or a loan form. Those are all different mechanisms that we can build into this RFQ to make sure that the respondents are more likely to propose something more favorable to the assembly and the community's goals. They talked a lot about different, you know, timing, weren't very worried about the construction season here. There is a March deadline for low-income housing, federal low-income housing, and so kind of talking through what that might look like. So those are all some of the comments. You guys can read that. I'm sure everyone's read the developer survey or the developer input report. I talked about the condition report. The next steps for this project are going to be, like I mentioned, issuing a request for bid for demolition, and also issuing a request for proposals for a firm to write a RFQ. So we will be hiring someone to use the statement of objectives that is also in your packet to draft that RFQ. I just want to briefly go over what's in your packet, and the statement of objectives is going to be the building block for drafting that RFQ. And that's why it's important, again, for you to provide input on the things that are most important to you. So the things that you want to carry the most weight in any scoring criteria, and the things that you are willing to give. Now, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have to give those things, but a successful responder will both they will be motivated to give you more of what your most important goals are. And in this case, I propose housing and maximum density housing and affordability, because that is the feedback I've consistently gotten from this body. And they'll be more able to do that if you are able to provide more incentives and clearly state those incentives. So again, that's outlined in the statement of objectives. We have the hazardous materials sample summary that just talks about what has been found in those homes. The developer interview summary, we already went over what that has. We drafted this brochure as just a brochure to help us with developer outreach. We haven't spread this widely. We have shared it with the Coast Guard because, of course, Telephone Hill is one of the lots that's being offered to developers as they respond to the Coast Guard request for information. But this is the type of kind of next step in developer outreach is this kind of some more targeted marketing. The other thing in the packet that I provided was a preliminary plat, because we want to make sure that the developer has the flexibility to kind of divide that lot up as they see fit. However, when we worked with First 40 said this is the alignment that we think would be based on the design and the engineering and community input that would be lend itself to maximum density housing. And so we haven't finalized that plat. We can't finalize that plat until the road is realigned, which of course hasn't been funded. But we want that information available to developers so that they can conceptualize what it can look like on that property with a different organization. The lot lines right now are very they go through properties, they go through homes. So the lot lines right now are, it will need to be replatted regardless of what alignment the eventual developer lands on. So I think what I would like to do is just to take you back to the statement of objectives and maybe start with the kind of what do we want? What are the highest priorities for a request for qualifications? And that's on page 40 of 136 of your packet. So I guess with hearing no input, I have.
I didn't know you were seeking input. I thought you were giving a minute for us to read, but it's like we read our packets.
No, I'm sorry. So what I'm asking from you today is to give input on the statement of objectives. And the first question is, I have starred housing units, high density, and a minimum of 20% affordability as the top 3 most important things that we would design an RFQ around. So I'm just looking for confirmation or input on that before I move on to what CBJ can offer in that process.
Does anybody have Ms. Wall?
Just wondering if, just so I have some thoughts on that. Do you want to take questions on, or there's lots of things in here. Is this the only thing we're focused on? Is statement objectives? And would you want questions on the larger project first? Sorry, just so I follow where we're going.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to pause and take questions on the packet of materials. And then maybe I jumped the gun there on my requested action.
Who has questions on the packet? Ms. Wall, since you started this, go ahead, and then Mr. Steininger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you remind me, because I think this is relevant in how I'll answer some of these other questions, the Coast Guard process and how that will, or may or may not intersect with this kind of suggested process here.
Madam Manager.
Thank you. So the Coast Guard has issued a request for information to developers. And as part of that, they have included our basically contact information to contact for available city parcels. And those two parcels that we have identified that could be used by developers are Telephone Hill and Peterson Hill. We have been contacted by developers with, questions about that. The RFI has been postponed a couple of times from closure. And so it's hard to know. I could foresee a situation where developers are like, well, no, I have my own property and I don't need to rely on CBJ property. I could definitely foresee proposals where they use that property. We have looked at the kind of back lot being the easiest to access for Coast Guard housing because it's probably the least bougie, right, in the back. It's also the easiest to develop without any road realignment. So that's the property that we have set aside. My hope is that we will get some closure of that RFI. It's been active for quite some time, before we make any, final outreach to developers. We've got a couple of months before we would begin demolition. And my proposal would be that kind of aggressive outreach, we've obviously done some outreach, happens after demolition has begun, just to demonstrate to the development community that the Assembly is serious about this project. Does that help?
Go ahead.
A quick follow-up. So if a developer was interested, would they have to answer both our RFQ and the Coast Guard's RFI if they were interested in developing Coast Guard on this property? Coast Guard you know what I'm saying.
Thank you. I would hope that the RFI process would have closed before we issue our RFQ.
Mr. Steininger.
Kind of a different area of the packet here. There's the hazardous material sample summary, and I am not an expert in any of this stuff. So I'm hoping if you can help kind of contextualize the numbers that I'm looking at here from an understanding of, how much asbestos you would expect to find in a home of this age versus what we found, as well as, the lead levels, like thinking both from the cost of demolition and then also some of the, kind of community comments we've heard about preserving the homes, like how reasonable actually is this with this information that we found on the condition of the homes and the hazardous material?
Manager Kester.
Thank
Like,
you.
is that a lot of lead or not much lead?
Well, and I don't think it really matters because it's there are minimum thresholds and it exceeds those minimum thresholds in all of these instances. And so that means that we will have to dispose of these materials, in a special manner that drives cost. I can't give you a good comparison because we haven't done a similar demolition project of like, is this, more expensive or less expensive than demoing your average 100-year-old home in the city and borough of Juneau. So I think that our cost estimate, about a third of our cost estimate is just in disposal of these hazardous materials. So we definitely anticipated it being quite expensive. As you know, from dealing with looking at Marie Drake and some of the other facilities, it's the disturbance of the hazardous materials when they really become a problem, right? So if no one's chewing on a lead painted windowsill that's been painted over by paint, it's contained, encapsulated, and it's not a problem. It's when you cut it, modify it, remodel it, et cetera, that you expose all those hazards. So I think that's an imperfect answer to your questions. I can certainly get more information and more detail on kind of what other units may have looked like. We just don't have a lot of experience. Doesn't mean I can't phone a friend up.
I'll ask a question why everybody thinks about theirs. I'm assuming this list is a little bit a wiggle room. So say there's somebody that wants to build 150 units, but they need us to give them lots of grants, and there's somebody that wants to build 80 units, but they need no help from us. I mean, but that would weigh in, you know, not only just the many amount of units, but how much they need help from us. Is that correct? I mean, there should be a little wiggle room in this.
Yes, I think that the developers asked for that wiggle room explicitly. That being said, I will be careful in making sure that you give me the feedback of where you want to wiggle and where you want to wag.
I'll look to the body for that one. So, any comments on the list? Ms. Hall?
This isn't exactly on the list. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The high density housing tax abatement program, at what level, you know, like, does that qualify for 70 or 100 or 150? You know, is there kind of a cutoff on when a project would be eligible for that?
Madam Manager?
I do not have an answer to that question. I don't know if anyone from CDD is still here. So I'll have to get back to you on the exact terms of that program, keeping in mind that the assembly can extend those.
Yeah. I think in the
incentive
past,
cycles.
we've done 12 years, but could be a mistake.
It is a 12-year period. Units,
Yeah.
it's a 12-year tax abatement. Was
Yeah.
was
Is
that the
that your
question?
question, Ms. Hall? Okay.
Oh.
It's 12 for 12 years. There's a tax abatement program. So, okay. Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to get my comments in here, I'm definitely, you know, I really appreciate the work that went into this whole packet, and especially the statement of objectives. I think this got me, you know, re-excited about this project, and as someone who's been working on this since it began, you know, it kind of captures the rationale and the strategy that we've been shooting for, you know, how we originally envisioned this project, and then all the things that we've learned along the way through our planning and our outreach. I like that it's really, what I see written here is flexible. I mean, I think that's the key, is we want to leave it to the development community to figure out what they can do with this. And we also know that to see our goals met, our housing goals, you know, the city has to be putting in, you know, incentives along the way. And I like that it reflects the tools that we've been developing since the Housing Action Plan came out, you know, with tax abatement and disposal of land and the Affordable Housing Fund. So I'm happy to see it all in here. I have a few ideas on ways that we can make it even more flexible that I think we should talk about as a body, because when we make it more flexible, it also means, you know, we may get less of our goals. But I think figuring out what we can do to make sure that developers bring us viable projects that meet our goals are going to require trade-offs and that flexibility. The one kind of thing, so maybe I won't get into the details of all those things right now, but one thing I was kind of surprised that was not on the bulleted list was related to commercial space. We know that, you know, we've done the assessment that, you know, this is not a good property to incentivize or to focus on commercial development. And there's a lot of research to back that up. But I wasn't sure if our place guide and our outreach meant it hadn't been suggested that some commercial use in there might make the project work better. So maybe that wasn't a conclusion that was drawn and why it's not on this list, or maybe it's just something I agree, it's not a starred item, but I wouldn't want to dissuade developers from including that if that's what made their project work. But I could be misremembering some of the conversations we've had.
I'll jump on that because I was thinking the same thing, because we've heard a lot of mixed use help us make a project. So if the body is willing to do that, I would lower your high density to about 85 units, 85 to 150, and because that gives them a space potentially to have a bottom floor of some commercial, if the body's willing to do that. Mr. Steiniger, do you have a? You can't grab your mic and not raise your hand.
It was half right. You inspired, so I was gonna say maybe just changing that high density 100, 150 units to just be a high density preference and not necessarily give a specific number, or maybe we craft bands that are, you know, if you get a preference for high density, you get this much of a preference in this range and this much in this range. So then adding a little bit of flexibility there and not specifically saying less than 100 units, we're no longer giving you that kind of preference or benefit.
Okay, Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to kind of voice a differing opinion on this. I think that when we put high density, 100 to 150 units, I think that is a wish list item, even if we're starring it. I think that it's not bad to indicate that that is a density that we would like to see. I'm fine with having another bullet that's not starred that says mixed use as a potential, but I'm not necessarily wanting to change our definition of high density. Just because I do want to set the standard up there. And if developers say, well, we can't make it work with 150, we can maybe make it work with 95. But I want it to be clear that that's what we're hoping for.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll kind of resonate your point a little bit. If we do go to a lower amount, that also changes other dynamics of the project. What is the most undigestible part of this whole thing is spending $5 million to level places that were making money and have history related to the community. You know, if we can do a lower amount of units, that fits more into the incremental infill type development. And then maybe looking at a hybrid of doing that, as well as some sort of land disposal that's already in current methods. But, you know, I think it would be a mistake at the point we're at now to spend that kind of money just on a demolition cost when the high density goal of 100 to 150 units is aspirational, even with that investment.
Thank you for those comments. Anybody else want to jump in? Go ahead, Ms. Hall.
I'm okay with the little bit lower density, but I'm also concerned about not a lot of parking. And I think, you know, if we have some really nice units up there, I think people are going to want to have a place for a vehicle. So that's just something I think we need to keep in mind. And also, you know, because many of these homes do have very valuable historical architectural elements in them, you know, encouraging contractors, you know, if there's an opportunity to salvage and sell some of the materials, you know, plant that seed. I know we wouldn't want to invest extra money in that, but they may also be aligned that way. I know the Bergman Hotel was able to do that and had a lot of interest for folks that live in older homes to buy up doors and different interior fixtures. So yeah, if there's a way we can make it energy efficient, a little bit lower density to allow for parking, some parking, and opportunity for salvage of valuable ancient wood. So, and keep the price down.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to comment on that. You talked about that one, Madam Manager, that it would be up to the contractor that was demolishing whether we could
Yeah, so
salvage.
the way that we manage those contracts is the contractor then owns everything. And so they can decide to, you know, repurpose, sell, give away, but they essentially have custody of all of those goods. And then I hear you on parking. The downtown parking garage is built to withstand 3 more layers of parking. However, it's very expensive to build that parking. I do think that in any scenario, those front lots would be the most attractive lots. And in order, I don't expect that the lots with the gorgeous view to necessarily be the affordable housing lots, and that any developer would have to care for a high-end tenant wanting that parking in what they propose to us. But I would leave that, up to the developer to figure out what they think can pencil out. Because in the end, we're not buying this. We're just incentivizing it.
Correct. Ms. Atkinson.
I just want to, I feel like maybe we can really quickly get into a point where we're very, very specific on exactly what we want to see on telephone. And when I read this, reading that this is a list of wants and that no proposal be excluded if below criteria is not met, we're not trying to design here the exact project we want to see. We're just trying to communicate to developers what will make their project competitive. So I don't know that we want to, I mean, maybe we do, but I don't know that we want to spend like an hour going back and forth on exactly what we want. But I think maybe fleshing out the list a little bit, like adding a mixed use bullet, for instance, is maybe a better route forward and will get us better design proposals than if we kind of figure out exactly what we want and try to curate that on this list here.
Any further? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 100% agree with Ms. Atkinson on that. I will say that what can be offered list, we do need to I think get specific on what, in my opinion, staff did a great starting place here, but there's a few decision points and potentially some other things. So I don't know if staff are looking for us to work on that now, or we come back with that. But I think this is a good place to start. But some of these I'm assemble, if we're gonna offer more flexibility or we're gonna do one thing versus the other, we should make, I think, that decision at some point. So maybe staff can give me feedback on how you want that feedback.
Staff. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Assemblymember Wool. I would love to hear your thoughts on offering the land for a land transfer for a free or significantly reduced value, and using some affordable housing funds either as a grant or a loan to offer, not to say you're eligible to apply for, but to say if you meet these criteria that are desired, we will commit to $2 million. Let's say you have in affordable housing loan funds, or a $1 million grant. And that might not be a decision that you can make tonight, but those are the type of details, rubber meets the road, that we're going to need to incorporate into an RFQ to be successful.
Ms. Wall.
So if we're doing that now, I'd say I'm very supportive of us selling the land for a nominal price / free, and supportive of the plan with the Affordable Housing Fund. I'd love to talk a little bit more about our tax abatement program at some point. And so maybe I'll try to figure out when we can fit that on a future agenda so that we can make sure that too is flexible for this project.
Okay, so we'll just focus this right now on, sorry, Ms. Wall's land at nominal, what'd you say? It's not really, it's not a formal motion, but we'll just focus on that discussion right this
Yeah,
second.
CBJ sell the land for a nominal price.
All right, Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm equally supportive as Ms. Wall. I think that, developers submitting proposals are very aware that there are not just one developer in town. And so offering a full slate of options and having them sort of compete to see who can offer the best without as many incentives is probably the way to go, just maximum flexibility. So I support Ms. Wall's somewhat motion.
Thank you for that, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd also support Assemblymember Wall's deferred land sale, but I would also like to see in what can be offered as the removal of CBJ will demolish and clear the site to make way for the development, but also a focus on the tax abatement as well as the creativeness with subdividing and looking at how to, redo that zone to meet more incremental infill type developments.
Okay, you guys have any comments, or just if you agree, we can just go with agree. Mr. Steininger.
I would say I'm supportive of the low cost on deferring the land or on the land sale and, free or no cost. And utilization of the affordable housing fund, because that comes with, strings. They have to meet certain criteria. I do think as we offer these things, they need to be tied to criteria that they must meet in order to get each of these incentives, because otherwise somebody will just say, yes, please, all of the above. But creating that flexibility and a baseline of that assumption that we're not going to get much for the sale of the land. I think I see a little bit differently on, Mr. Brooks' comments on the demolition, clear the site. Personally, I would prefer to see that we pushed off demolishing the site until we got proposals back. Again, to kind of keep that maximum flexibility, because we may have a developer that says, keep one or two to keep the historic characteristics, but demolish the rest and build something large over here to create some density. And we may see some kind of, option like that. But I do think that
Mr.
part of
Steininger,
that.
I'm going to stop you on that because I think that's going to be a separate discussion.
Okay. Because I mean, I guess within the what can be offered, though, I still think that we should offer that we will pay for the demolition. I guess it's a point that's still pertinent to this list that we're talking about.
I think we're going to get into that because I think we have disagreement on that. So I'm just trying to take one thing at a time. So, Ms. Hall or Mr. Kelly, you have anything about keeping it flexible and giving the property away? And if you don't, that's fine too.
Thanks. I think I would want to be very clear that if we are offering the affordable housing fund, that in addition to the requirements that they're meeting here, that they also meet the strict requirements that any other applicant would have to for the affordable housing fund. And it would be my preference that it not be a grant, that it would be a loan from the affordable housing fund, so we could recuperate that money after some time. I think I need to think about how I feel about offering at a reduced or free.
Ms. Hall.
Regarding the deferred land sale, I prefer the and/or option. So either for a nominal price and/or defer the payment for the purchase until the developer is realizing a gain, for us to keep maximum flexibility.
Thank you for that. And I would say my thoughts are along what Ms. Atkinson said. Keep them all open, but see what kind of deals that people can come up with. Keep it a little competitive. So I would like to see the most housing for the least amount of money that we can give or do. So anyway, so going back to looking at our next steps, first one is issuing a bid for demolition. Do you want to speak to that, Madam Mayor and excuse me? You could be the mayor for a while, Madam Manager, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. I suspect within the next month, we will have the bid plan set and the information that we need to request bids for demolition. So this body has consistently given that direction. And so staff is proceeding with that. We have not obviously issued a bid, but we have spent resources on designing what that would look like.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's our next step. Ms. Wall, you want to give me a motion? Then we can talk about it.
Well, I guess I think we already have a motion. I don't know that we need a motion, and I'm a bit afraid that we'll get into a.
Okay, why don't you think we need a motion, or just
Because we have
continue on with our
already
next steps?
appropriated money and staff are moving forward with bid. So I would say if there's someone who would want to change that, because I heard that, they should make a motion as opposed to, because I'm supportive of the action that we've already
Okay.
taken, so I'm not going to make that motion.
Very good. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll make the motion to not spend $5 million on the demolition of Telephone Hill and instead direct the manager to have staff investigate ways to look at land sales and incremental infill.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any objection? All right, Ms. Wall, and then Ms. Atkinson, and then Ms. Hall, and then Mr. Steininger.
I'll object for a question to the maker of the motion. You know, we've spent years going down this path. We chose, you know, from a suite of options. Do you have a sense of what financially it would take to choose another path and explore infill development? I imagine it would be a lot more cost to redo a lot of the work that we've done down one path.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. I know that there has been a lot of costs associated, but whatever cost would be required to redirect, I think it'd be safe to assume that it'd be less than $5 million. And you know, that's not to it's not to say that something doesn't need to happen here. It's just, is this the absolute priority of spending $5 million to achieve some sort of housing? And at this point in time, that is not the case. So and even with the incremental infill option, you know, there could be a level of demo involved with that. But I don't think it's appropriate to demo the entire hill, lower it many feet, and just make a flat plat for who knows what. Because like I said already, all the intended uses for what could happen afterwards is aspirational.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I've had Mr. Steininger, then Ms. Hall, and Ms. Atkinson, unless I said that wrong. Were you next, Ms. Atkinson? Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I wrote it after I said it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will also object to this motion. I have, as many people in this body have over and over made clear that we really would like to see high-density housing on Telephone Hill, and that's not feasible with infill. That is not something that we're going to get to really change the tide of housing here in Juneau for young families, for our seniors who need to age in place here. It's just, I'm not 100% objecting to the demolition timeline flexibility, but the infill is very counter to what we have decided up until this point and what we're discussing here today. So I will have to object.
Thank you for that. Mr. Steininger.
I'm a little conflicted on this motion as it is. My gut feeling is that the timing and the sequencing of what we're doing is wrong, not necessarily that we need to completely change our focus and change our direction towards infill to the ends that we've been talking about, maintaining flexibility within the RFQ that we put out. You know, what I'm looking for is allowing for that flexibility for all types of developments that could come forward with all different ways to do things, and, you know, creating the most units for the least cost to the city. You know, if we spend the money on demolition now, that precludes us from looking at options that may come in through this RFQ should the demolition not have happened. And so that's why I'd like to see the demolition wait until we work through the RFQ. I don't want to redirect staff towards working on investigating infill. I object to that portion of this amendment. I guess I could offer an amendment to the amendment to, you know, alter it to delaying demolition until after the RFQ is issued. So I guess I'll do that. I will offer an amendment to the amendment to delay demolition until after the RFQ is issued and remove the instruction to have staff look into infill, but to issue the RFQ with that maximum flexibility instead.
Yeah, and I think it's just an amendment to the motion.
Or an amendment to the motion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, thank you.
Any objection to that? So Mr. Brooks, you want to go ahead with that, speak to your objection? And then if nobody else has one, I'll speak to mine.
Yes, I appreciate it, and that is, very close to the idea. It's not necessarily that I don't want any possibility of any type of demolition happening, because whatever type of development that is done, there's going to be a degree of that. The price associated with the proposed demolition costs is what I'm having the issue with. And when we talk about the project tonight here, and times that we've talked about in the past, we get very fixated on the moment, and may be given the impression that is like one of the only things we're doing to address the housing need on the front, when we have a lot of other things that we're working on too. And as each one of those other things gets worked on, the need that this specific project can fill becomes less and less prevalent. And especially with that kind of funds associated, just to get it to a blank slate on top of what has already been invested, and had a community member give us all a piece of paper that says, over $2 million has been invested to date. And that's just for a bunch of empty, unkept houses that are no longer bringing in revenue. So it's like I said before, it's not necessarily that nothing should be done. There definitely is the will and desire to do some sort of development, but there is no desire from the community or the people to spend $5 million to level this area. That's something that, we as the body have gotten into, but it's not the will of the public.
Thank you. Any further objection to the amendment, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. Just a objection to make sure I'm clear from the maker of the motion. So it's your motion that we would basically be delaying the demolition until after we already have a response back on somebody to basically answer this RFQ that we're laying out here.
Mr. Steininger?
Effectively, yes, it would be, we would still have the money appropriated for demolition. It would be within the RFQ. My idea is within the RFQ, it would still commit the city to paying for the demolition should the winning project out of that RFQ require demolition. So we're still committing to the demolition. We are still, projecting that strength in our face in this project, but it would preserve that maximum optionality of what the end project could look like for anyone responding to the RFQ. Because we have gone to this point without having started demolition because of factors outside of our control. And so at this point, we have the ability to provide that optionality while retaining that commitment to the project, I guess. That's my intention.
Thank you. I'll withdraw my objection.
Seeing no further objection, I'll object. I appreciate where coming from Mr. Steininger, but we have been talking this, as Ms. Wall said, for years. No one has stepped forward and said, we would like to do infill development. We've had other people say, get rid of the houses and we'll look at developing that. In fact, we've even asked Telephone Hill neighbors that have come up with a different plan than us. That's what I keep telling them, come up with a developer that will support that, and they can't. So I think it just delays the project further if we don't demolish the houses. So we have an amendment and we have objection. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For amendment number 1, delay demolition until after the RFQ is issued and remove instruction for staff to look into infill, but to issue the RFQ with maximum flexibility instead. Mr. Steininger?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
No.
Ms. Hall?
No.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
No.
Ms. Atkinson?
No.
Madam Mayor?
No.
Motion fails with 5 nays and 2 yays.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we're going back to the main motion, and Ms. Hall, you didn't get a chance to speak to your objection. Do you still want to speak to your objection?
No.
All right, so Mr. Steininger and then Ms. Wall.
Right, so I'll speak then in objection of the underlying motion, primarily because I don't think at this stage it is a good use of staff time to have them start investigating an entirely new track on this. You know, if it could have been done for free via the RFQ process and have a bidder come in with that, I would have been in support. But if it's distracting staff from the other very important things that we heard about earlier this evening and going and flood fighting in DC, I don't think that's an appropriate use of our time and effort of staff. And so I'll have to object to the underlying motion.
Thank you for that. Ms. Wall, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to address Mr. Brooks' points, or one of his point. I think I very much understand why he and others are, shocked when they think about the amount of money that we're spending to demolish housing. And what I'll ask people to keep in mind is what the cost is of doing nothing. We have 300 units short just for the Coast Guard showing up. That doesn't include the crisis that we're currently in. We are doing there are lots of things happening. We're working on them. We're making progress, not fast enough. This is a big opportunity to move the needle. And yes, that costs money. If it didn't, we would have high density housing all over this community. We don't. So I understand why that is so frustrating to people. But that's why we've been continuing to move in this direction, is that we know what is going to happen if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. I'll speak to that too. I mean, a case in point is Peterson Hill. We spent a lot of money to develop that subdivision, and it's got quite a few houses, and Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority is going gangbusters right now to do housing. So, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And, I know that this whole thing has been going on for a long time, but the voters passed, $2 million in funding off a 1% temporary sales tax for the redevelopment of Telephone Hill. And if we go through with this demolition, we'll be at over $7 million, and we'll be giving them a blank plot. And that's not what they voted for. That's not what they're expecting. And that same kind of investment can go way further in other areas. We were just, at the meeting before this talking about what could possibly be done with this facility. And we already know that this facility has deferred maintenance costs well beyond the assessed value of it. Demolishing this building and then having one of the most prime pieces of real estate in downtown, that's where it's practical to knock down a building. But when we're talking about not only knocking down buildings, but reforming the geology of the area, that's where people are starting to get lost.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Brooks. So, Madam Clerk, we have a motion and objection. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For Mr. Brooks' motion to not spend $5 million on the demolition of Telephone Hill and direct the manager to have staff investigate ways to look at land sales and incremental infill. Mr. Brooks.
Yes.
Ms. Adkisson.
No.
Mr. Steininger.
No.
Ms. Wall.
No.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Hall.
No.
Madam Mayor.
No.
Motion fails with 5 nays and 2 yays.
All right, thank you for that. And then, Madam Manager, let's talk about how much we've spent this far on Telephone Hill and get the right information out there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You have appropriated a total of $5.8 million for Telephone Hill, of which you've spent just over 500,000 to develop, design, and get it to this point.
All right, thank you for that. And do you need anything further from us tonight on this topic? It doesn't sound like we want to give you a ton of input on anything.
I
but-
will warn you that without anything further, I am going to be coming back to you because the direction is, let's see. Sorry, I should.
We want you to go, I don't think we want to put barriers on it because we want to see what people come up with.
Let me summarize what I understand. And I'm sorry, I was expecting a little more feedback, but I think I can give you a summary of what I understand. I understand that you would like to include mixed use as an acceptable use, that you would like to prioritize in the RFQ housing units, high density with a range of 100 to 150 units and a minimum of 20% affordability. I am hearing that you are open to selling the land at a nominal value or deferring the payment of the land. You are also open to a affordable housing loan in the future. I think that is the, and that we are proceeding with issuing a bid for demolition, and we are proceeding with issuing a request for proposals for an RFQ. I do think that there will be another opportunity for you to touch the RFQ to finalize that direction, but that is what I'm hearing. So
Okay, I'll just speak for me. In my case, I agreed with your statement of objectives. So that's why I stalled, is because I agreed with it. So I'm looking at the body and seeing, I think overall people are agreeing with that. Is that better, clearer for you then? So, and Mr. Steininger had a comment, so.
Actually, a question, because we jumped topics earlier in this, and I had a question on the what do we want section. What is old Juneau building design? When I look around downtown, I see concrete buildings, I see some Victorian looking, I see cedar siding. What does that mean for a developer? How should they interpret that?
yeah, that's a great question. I think it means not New Portland design. We got some feedback from just the schematics that were presented in the place guide. That something with a little more
Something
character.
that would fit in.
Yes, yeah.
Which is why that hill is like it is, because initially when it got set aside for state capital, the 4 designs were so atrocious that the public went, Mr. Kelly, and then Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. So on the last bullet point under what do we want? I guess my question would be, what would qualify for senior housing? Would there be ADA requirements included in that?
I think it could look like a lot of different things, but in its most basic, you would want units that are elevator accessible, have, you know, some of those ADA amenities, but I do not read this, or my intention is not that this means assisted living. It would still mean seniors living independently, but with the amenities that they need to be able to live in the home.
Ms. Hall. Oh,
thank-
sorry, excuse me, Ms. Atkinson.
Mayor keeps skipping me tonight.
I need to start writing them down, sorry. My pen was not working earlier, so.
I have a question for the manager, and maybe this will upend our whole conversation up till now, so I do apologize. But I do have a instinct to provide maximum flexibility because I'm interested to see what people can make pencil out, what they can make work. And I'm certainly not a developer. I don't know what they can make pencil. But I guess your sense that us offering such a flexible offerings, like, oh, maybe you could get a loan or a grant of maybe 2 million or maybe 500,000, would that have the opposite effect of not being helpful and not getting responses?
That's a good question, Madam Manager.
Thank you. I would want to pin you down on those details before issuing an RFQ.
Okay, Ms. Hall?
Thank you. And I would just say the words you were all looking for is age-friendly design. And, really that could be anyone, what's good for our seniors is generally good for anyone because who knows when you're going to need more accessibility. So,
All right, Ms. Atkinson, and then I'm gonna probably wind this topic up because we still have things to do before the end of the night.
Okay, I won't, I guess, Madam Manager, I know you said we'll have a chance to touch this RFQ later, but I mean, have we, from that answer you gave of, we really do need to have some clear parameters. Have we done anything at all tonight? Or it was like, have we not really accomplished anything on helping you sort of craft this RFQ?
I think we've made great progress, and most importantly, you've all had an opportunity to reflect on the direction that we're headed and reaffirm that direction.
All right, can we move on to topics? Okay, number 4. And we have to watch our time, 9:15. Number 4, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Seawalk procurement and financing update.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
Thank you. This purpose, the goal that I have with bringing this agenda item to today is to get a support for introducing an ordinance for a revenue bond for the Seawalk project. But I want to walk backwards from that because there are a lot of important milestones that have to happen first. The Seawalk has long been a priority. We've been working on Seawalk design for some time and slowly putting away funds to be able to, passenger fee funds to be able to fund that project. The timeline has been accelerated a little bit because Petra Marine, who owns property for about half of the Seawalk, if you recall, we secured a easement. Madam Mayor, can I just request it's a short break for the room to clear? It's difficult for me to keep.
Okay,
My
let's
thought.
take 2 minutes.
The later it gets in the evening, so I will try to be brief. The purpose of bringing this item before you is to get support to introduce an ordinance for a revenue bond for construction of the Seawalk. We've been working towards that goal and designing the Seawalk and slowly putting away funds for it. That timeline has been exacerbated because Petra Marine, who owns about half of the property that we're going to be building the Seawalk on. If you recall, we entered into an agreement with them to lease that property to construct the Seawalk. They are moving forward with construction of their new dock in Uplands in 27. And the construction of the Seawalk and the construction of their infrastructure needs to happen concurrently for lots of reasons. One of them being mobilization costs, staging of materials, access to the property, Petra Marine, because of the improvements they're going to be making and because of the disruption that construction would make to their operations, they will not allow us access after that 27. So all of that means that we need to do that portion of our project concurrent with Petra Marine, which means we need to both be using the same contractor. And Western Marine is the contractor that they're using. We work with Western Marine quite a bit. We're currently working with them on Aurora Harbor. That there are other contractors in the region that can do this work. So I am planning on making a best interest finding based on all of the reasons outlined in this memo to work directly with Western Marine, to work very closely with contracts and with law on a procurement process that still guarantees our that we're getting the most value for that product. And there are some ways to do that outlined in this memo. But what I'm really asking for you today is to support the Seawalk, which is a $28 million project. We would bid the second half in our traditional procurement process where we design it and then we issue a request for proposals. It is just that stretch of it we are going to need to do concurrent with Petra's work. So that is not something that the Assembly, of course, needs to vote on, but you need to be aware of it because it is highly unusual to issue a manager's best interest finding for that large of a project. Happy to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So is this funding for a portion that couldn't be covered by marine passenger fees?
Madam Manager.
100% of the project cost is marine passenger fees. So no, it's all passenger fees.
Do you want to explain how the revenue bonds and the passenger fees work?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So we have about $4 million set aside for this project that will get us through design. It's about a $28 million price tag for the project. That's a preliminary number. We're not at 100% design. But what we would do is we would issue revenue bonds, which is not a general obligation bond that requires a vote of the public, but it's a revenue bond that we can secure with a guaranteed revenue stream. So because we have a guaranteed revenue stream with passenger fees, we can borrow that kind of tax-free money and pay it back over time.
Mr. Kelly and then Ms. Wall.
Thank you. Do those revenue bonds incur any obligations on our part beyond repaying them and the interest?
Madam Manager.
We would have an obligation to construct the project.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's okay if you don't know the answer to this question. One of the, when I first started on the Assembly and when I was involved in the blueprint downtown, like Seawalk was always a top priority. And so I understand why we've been pursuing it aggressively. I did, looking at the results from the survey that we're going to talk about here coming up, it's clear that, tourism is a sensitive topic for the community when it comes to our budget, which we all knew, but it was highlighted in the report. As we've done our tourism surveys every year, do we have faith that that Seawalk still remains a top priority?
Madam Manager.
Yes, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, it is infrastructure that we build for explicitly for our visitor that locals also really enjoy. So it maximizes that value of building infrastructure that is enjoyed year round by residents. It also has the opportunity to really reduce congestion because the waterfront walk from the AJ dock is a lot shorter than the walk along the side of the road, which means you're going to have less buses on the street, less people on sidewalks, that sidewalk stretch on Thane, and less congestion. So it really does meet a couple of those community priorities.
Any further questions? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. This is really a question I should have let you know in advance I was going to ask. So if you're not ready for it, that's okay. But Ms. Wall, speaking of priorities, like one of my priorities is dock electrification. And I am just curious how much we might have in that fund and how close we are to being able to fund more dock electrification.
Madam Manager.
Thank you. And I cannot remember off the top of my head how much we have in dock electrification. I know that it's significantly more than Seawalk. I'm going to guess it's, look, phone a friend, $13 million for dock electrification. We are looking, there is funding in the governor's budget to create a program for that may create a program for dock electrification that we would be eligible for, pending all things, that the money stays in the budget and that the program is created and that we compete favorably for that program. This is why I think it's important to keep that money in our account for dock electrification to really demonstrate our commitment. We're a lot further along than any other partner in the region on that dock electrification project. The two docks, it's a $54 million price tag for dock electrification. You could split that up and do one.
Mr. Steininger.
I don't expect an answer to this now, but it'd be good to see the actual terms of what the debt would be, like how many years, how much debt, the debt service would be coming out of our annual head tax budget, how much we're going to pay in interest over time. I'd appreciate seeing that information when the ordinance gets drafted. I know we don't know the actual interest rate until we actually issue the debt and all of that, but some kind of estimate. And then to kind of contextualize that, how many years would it take us to actually put away the $28 million to do this project if we didn't have, this kind of fire under us that was Petromarine activity to make us try and do it now? Like how far out would this project have been otherwise without issuing the debt?
Madam Manager.
Let's see. So to answer your first question, absolutely, we would structure the debt to be able to make those payments without sacrificing other marine passenger facilities no longer than the lifespan of the infrastructure. It's a long lifespan infrastructure. I believe we have a 35-year lease with Petro for that. So that would probably be the limitation on that lifespan. Your second question is how long would it take for us to just save those funds? We have always intended on bonding for this. It really just depends on what you want to prioritize. Like if we didn't do Marine Park, we could save those funds more quickly. So we've been prioritizing putting aside funds for dock electrification instead of the Seawalk, knowing that we would potentially bond for either one of those projects. So what is it, like $20 million passenger fee budget a year? We obligate a big chunk of that in kind of operational costs. So I can certainly do a more detailed analysis for you, but the strategy has been to request revenue bonds.
All right. Ms. Wall, would you start us off with a motion, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the committee of the whole direct staff to draft an ordinance to pursue $28 million in revenue bonds for the Seawalk project to be funded by marine passenger fees.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 5. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Budget process, how members propose reductions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
I would actually like to hand this one over to our finance chair.
That's you, Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We told Ms. Flick she could go home. I won't go through this whole memo. Happy to take questions, but I got a feedback from a few of you as we've been approaching this, hard process that we're facing. We do the budget process a little different every year, but this year the idea of significant reductions in our operating services is tricky. And so we've got a few things here to share with you. And I won't go through all of them, but just to say that this is a starting place. We know these conversations will be iterative, but we wanted to give the assembly kind of a place to start big picture about kind of where our priorities were. And so this is what we came up with, knowing that at the end of the day, we're all going to have to make motions and decisions and votes as we get closer to the budget, but having some conversations before we get there. I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions for Ms. Wall? All right, and just so everybody knows, I talked to the city manager today and said we're gonna need staff help on this, so she said, go to her first because it's operational and you have to see what your operational impacts are before you head for finance, so swing by her first. Or Mr. Barr. We'll throw them both under the bus, so I don't think we need any motions or anything on that. If you have any further questions, talk to Ms. Wall, the finance chair. So with that, item number 6. Ms. Shivens, how long do you think you're going to take on this? Okay, well, I'm just making sure. So we, if we need to, we can extend. So, I said if we need to. Ms. Heimbigner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I promise to soon pass the mic to Meilani Shivens of Raincoast Data. I just wanted to start the conversation with a little bit of context. While Brecken is pulling up the slides, I'm Ashley Heimbigner, Communications and Engagement Director for the city. And after the results of the October 2025 municipal election, the body quickly came together and recognized that you needed to hear from your community before heading into these challenging conversations. And then your direction was formalized at the Assembly retreat in December, and that gave the Communications and Engagement team our marching orders to conduct a pretty robust outreach campaign to learn from the community what their priorities are, what they value, and where they're willing to make trade-offs. And one of our, the centerpiece of this outreach effort, next slide, please. So you can see where we are here moment is where the star is, but we started with the October 25 election, moved through our identified options that we discussed with the Assembly, that the Assembly provided to the manager. We conducted the Community Compass Survey, which you will hear more about from Meilani in just a moment. And now we're conducting our Community Compass workshops. We're really excited about these. The first took place last Wednesday at the Filipino Community Hall. I'm grateful to have several members of the audience that participated in that workshop. Our next event is coming up tomorrow night at the Valley Library, and then our third event is next week at the Douglas Library. We are also excited to be talking with you and conducting those resource allocation exercises with you as well. Once we have the results of those activities, we will provide a full recap of the input we heard from the community at the April 11th budget meeting. And then you all will get to hear from the community directly at the April 15th listening session. And then, of course, the end of this circle is the implementation. But I wanted to hone in just a little bit on the Community Compass Survey. Hopefully everyone in the room had a chance to take that survey. Our goals there were to seek guiding principles from the public to inform community priorities and your budget decision making. We intentionally worked with Raincoast Data to make the survey concise, to most importantly make it accessible, because we wanted to hear from as broad a swath of our community as possible, and to make it replicable, something that could potentially be, this could be a baseline that we build off off of to conduct this community sentiment outreach for years to come, should the assembly decide to do that. We also heard, and knew that members of our community would want to share more. So we created an additional input form to supplement the survey and invited them to reach out to the Borough Assembly directly. In terms of outreach and distribution, we used our traditional channels, the website, press releases, posters and flyers around town. We had a robust social media campaign. We had posters on our city buses. We did radio ads and interviews on all major stations. We had table tents in community spaces. We did some tabling in public spaces. We reached out to staff and then had a lot of direct outreach with community organizations to encourage them to share the survey with their stakeholders. We really enjoyed the public tabling. This is a photo of Tasha and Phil from the comms and engagement team at the Lemon Creek Breeze-In on one busy Saturday. We were at Safeway, Foodland, Forbidden Peak Brewery, and I think our favorite was the Juneau Douglas High School lunch hour. But what was really great about this is people might, some people came up and said, "You're not going to want to hear what I have to say," or were sort of curious as to what was going on, but generally they were happy to be asked. So we were glad to be there. We were glad to provide the opportunity for that community input. So thank you for charging our team with doing that. This is a photo from our workshop last week. Again, this is a more detailed resource allocation exercise for people that are really willing to get in the weeds with us on these budget conversations. And community priorities. I think what was interesting for many of us, and this is sort of a preview of what we might share, is that a lot of folks came into the room wanting to talk about adding and talking about revenue generation. And we, sort of were surprised when he had to say, well, actually, we're here to cut. This is where we're going. We're looking at budget cuts. So really interesting conversations, really great ideas shared, and I'm excited to hear what we hear, excited to see what we hear tomorrow. So with that, I will pass it to Meilani Shivens. Brecken.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Ms. Heimbigner. Welcome, Ms. Shivens.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. So welcome to the Juneau Budget Survey Report. I'm going to have to present this way. Next slide, please. So,
and Ms. Shivens, you can pick up the mic and turn all the way if you need to.
Okay, I might do that. So I think I have to say that the response rate here was nothing short of extraordinary. We had 4,400 responses, unique responses, just too shy of that. From a statistically significant aspect, we had a 99% confidence level. That's a very high statistical survey. Next slide, please. One thing that we kept a close eye on as we were going through the survey was looking at generation, geography, race, making sure that the surveys that were coming in looked like the community as a whole. And we got as close as we could. And then we also weighted the final survey results by generation and geography. Next slide. We wanted to ask the survey, ask the community budget questions in several different ways to provide the maximum amount of tools for you and for the community, for the CBJ. So the first question that we asked, we took 20 different elements of the budget that are all known to be incredibly important. Everyone agrees they're incredibly important. And we said, you can only pick your top 4 or 5. Someone said, I had to leave off choices I strongly support to keep my list short. And I think that encapsulates this very well. It was a forced prioritization exercise. Next slide. Like I said, everyone got a chance to pick 4 or 5 of their favorite items. Next slide. And then we're just going to zoom in on the top 10. So in terms of the very top items, we saw that the number 1 choice was streets, roads, bridges, and winter maintenance. That was followed by schools, K through 12 education support, number 2, followed by public safety. Number 4 was water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid waste. So really just the core elements that the municipality provides. The community said, these are the things that we do not want to cut. This was the do not want to cut question. We found some interesting different distinctions among generational groups. While most chose streets, roads, bridges, we did see that millennials, their number one priority was K through 12 school education, public education. For those, our greatest generation, those 80 and older, and the silent generation, their number one priority was Bartlett Regional Hospital and healthcare. And for Generation Z and Generation Alpha, those in their teens and 20s, their number one priority was recreation. Rounding out the top 10 list, we also had trails, parks, and open green space, Juneau International Airport, natural disaster response, mitigation and preparedness, and libraries, museums, arts, and culture. Next slide. I'm not going to go over this slide, but what I wanted to let you know is we did a lot of analysis by subgroup. So if it's important to you, if you really want to understand who feels a specific way, whether area of town, generation, et cetera, we do have lots of tables in this report. And so you can go and really look at that subgroup analysis. Next slide, please. So then we ask the same question the opposite way. Instead of saying, what are the things that you do not touch? Please do not touch these elements. We took the same list of 20 items and we said, if we had to, if there is a budget gap and you're required to, which are the elements of the budget that you would consider cutting first if you were required? A member of the public said it's almost impossible to pick. All seem like priorities. And I think that encapsulates it well. Again, this is a forced prioritization exercise. Nobody is saying that these elements are not important. We've had many surveys and studies showing that all of these things are important to the Juneau public. Next slide. So again, everyone had the same list of 20 items and was asked to pick their top 4 or 5 items. Next slide. And so when we look at the top items that came out of this, number 1 was tourism management, visitor infrastructure, followed by climate change and energy efficiency, followed by economic development and workforce support. There was actually 3 elements on the top, the top lowest priorities, or the 10 lowest priorities, that also showed up on the top 10 highest priorities, which means these elements, recreation, libraries, museum, arts and culture, and trails, parks, and open green space, choosing to make cuts there or choosing not to make cuts there will be controversial because there's a similar level of support or some level of support on each of those top 10 lists. Rounding out the top 10, we have housing and land use planning. We mentioned recreation. We have homeless services. And then the 2 at the bottom, ports and harbors and social services. Next slide. We wanted to not just ask about places to cut the budget or what to keep, but potential new revenue generation. So we came up with a list of potential areas to increase the city budget for CBJ. And next slide, please. And asked where people, if there was any revenue generation, potential taxes that the public felt comfortable with. We asked this question in a different way. It was not a forced prioritization exercise. We said, check all the boxes that you feel comfortable adding. And so, look at it as it's measured as a slightly different way. There was 2 revenue generation concepts that had more than 50% of support by those responding to it. One was looking at different ways to do property taxes, and the other was underperforming property fees. One element here that jumped out to me, we added a category there of no increased taxes or fees. I was curious how that would rate. It rated as lower than I expected. 22% of the public said they don't want to have any new or additional taxes or fees. Next slide. We wanted to then ask the question in a different way and really look through the lens of community values. So let's leave the actual budget categories and budget items and really look at how people want the city and borough of Juneau to be operated and put it through that lens. Next slide. So we did the same forced prioritization exercise. We came up with 15 different community value statements and asked, you know, which of these the community wanted the assembly and staff to be thinking about when they go through the budget process and leading the community. Next slide. There were 5 of these that kind of rose a little bit to the top. The first one there had the most support of any item in this entire survey. It is making Juneau a place where working age residents and young families can live, work, and stay long-term as the #1 priority that came out of this budget survey. The second priority is delivering high-quality core services, followed by a well-maintained public infrastructure, strong fiscal management and responsible budgeting, and a little bit lower is expanding the availability of affordable and attainable housing across all income levels. Next slide, please. We ended up adding 2 questions to the survey that weren't specifically budget related, but we wanted to take advantage of the fact that we were doing such a large scale survey. We wanted to just ask how the community felt about the CBJ overall. Next slide. So what we saw is that just about half of community residents, 45, say they feel positively about the city and borough of Juneau, including 13% that feel very positive, that have very positive feelings. Just under a third, so 32% of the community said they have negative feelings, including 9% who say they have very negative feelings. And just about a quarter of the community, led by our Gen Z surveyors, say they're neutral. They don't have an opinion. Next slide. And finally, the last area that we asked about was communication. How do you prefer to learn about CBJ, whatever CBJ is up to, and how would you like to interact with CBJ? Next slide. And so this was, again, check all that apply, not a forced prioritization. So at the very top is the CBJ website. 65% of Juneau residents like to interact with the CBJ or find out what the CBJ is up to through the website. That's followed by just over half of Juneau residents that want notices sent by email. 45% say they really enjoy online news organizations. We have several of them here in Juneau, followed by Facebook and radio. Next slide. And then what I wanted to leave you with is the thoughts of Juneau residents. Next slide. We had a lot of thoughts. We had the opportunity for open-ended responses. 6,000, we had 6,000 open-ended responses that ended up in 201,000 words. That's equivalent to the community of Juneau collaboratively writing Moby Dick. We have 424 pages of comments. Next slide. And that really, I just want to, you know, the report has been posted now, and I just want to give you a quick navigational guide. We tried to make it very simple. Pages 1 through 8 are a standalone summary. You don't have to read the rest if you don't want to. Pages 9 through 39 are a deep analysis by subgroup. For people who really like diving into the details and the tables. And then pages 40 through nearly 500 are the analysis and then every single comment that we got from the public that was fit to print. We got rid of a few naughty words. And so next slide. And that is your 9-minute summary of the Juneau budget report, but I am available with any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. That was great. Mr. Kelly and then Ms. Wall.
Thank you. Something I found curious was one of the responses for new revenue, especially considering that Prop 1 seems to do exactly the opposite of what the first choice was. So I'm kind of, if my memory is right, the first choice was reforming property tax code. And we just, of course, through a charter amendments, have a capped mill rate. Are you able to make any sense of that?
So the example that we gave, we put some examples on there and, maybe we shouldn't have. But the example that we put on there was to structure the rate so that, for example, look at structuring the rate in different ways. We looked at a Jackson Hole property tax where there is a lower base rate for or there is a higher base rate, and then residents who are year-round residents get a discount on that rate, so that there's some type of different rates for people who are using homes year-round long-term residential. So maybe and we didn't ask the why in those cases. There was a other box there. Sometimes people used the other box to explain why. So I don't know, but it may have had to do with the particular wording of that option.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Shivens, and our whole communication team for this effort. It was really impressive, and although like the survey, maybe there weren't like surprises or it won't make any of our decisions easier, it was really clarifying for me to see it all laid out that way, and the amount of outreach that went out to get that many responses is just like something we've never done before. So really appreciate it. And we'll be continue to pour over this. One of the things I appreciated about what you did was, looking at the demographics and, weighting the final answers by, if we knew we didn't get quite all the Valley representatives that, we need to be representative of the community, there was weighting there. I did notice that, you asked about income level and how people experience it, which was not something that you can weight by, which was explained. I walk into reading any survey or any kind of public input with, assumption that people with more resources are going to have more access to participate in these things. If we can't wait by that, is it a fair assumption when I read this that, it's when it comes to income, we're not representative of our community, and we kind of have to filter the results, and that is not a critique of the survey, it's just kind of a reality. Is that a fair filter for me as I look at it?
I tried to do some side analysis on this. So I looked at, what Assemblymember Wall is talking about is we asked people, do you feel like you are low income, middle income, or high income? We didn't put numbers with it because that is extremely complicated to survey, because I do survey that for other clients. But I also spent some time looking at how close are we getting? And I think, I think we were like 7% said that they were low income, and 7% of the community of Juneau is below poverty. So potentially that is an alignment. Not necessarily. I was surprised by how many people thought the percentage of people who said that they felt that they were high income. I thought that was a win for the community in a way, that sense of being higher income. We don't have a mathematical way of measuring how close we are on the low income. I think if we do this again, I would like to offer some better prizes to try to bring in some people that might be motivated by prizes. But I think we did. I think with the weighting, I think we get most of the way there.
Anything further? So you've done lots of these. Were you surprised by any of the results?
I was really delighted with how people answered the survey overall, how they used the survey instrument. The responses came in just people used the tool just as had been intended, and so I was delighted by that. Was I surprised? There was a couple things I was surprised by. I think I mentioned them. I was expecting a higher percentage of people to say that they don't want any taxes or no new taxes at all. or no raise taxes. So that came in lower than I was expecting. But overall, I've used this type of tool in this way across many different projects and clients, and I find it to be incredibly useful, and also just very useful to present to people and then to use later as a tool. And I feel like we got there.
Thank you. Any last questions, Mr. Brooks?
Thank you. I can't recall if it was on the extra revenue page or not, but there was a 17% other. Can you tell me what page out of the 500 that those others might be on?
Yes, there is, it's actually in the table of contents. So if you go to the table of contents,
Page 4, the property.
we
tax
have,
exemption.
so I have to take my glasses off for this one though. So for revenue generation, it's page 426, other.
Thank you.
We tried to make it very easy to navigate. So thank you for letting me point that out.
Go ahead, Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Kester.
I just want to note for the listening public that we did issue a press release that has a link to this survey. It's also on the Community Compass website. That's juno.org/community compass. And so the listening public, it's of course also published in our packet, but just want to give the listening public where they can navigate to find the full report.
Okay, and just so we don't get there, we have 5 minutes left. So Mr. Kelly, will you extend this just for 10 minutes? Because there was a couple hands up.
Thank you. I move to suspend the rules by extending us for an additional 10 minutes until 10:10 PM and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Okay, seeing none, we have Ms. Wall and Ms. Atkinson. And Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The tourism, I think one of the top priorities for budget cuts was tourism management and tourism infrastructure, or something like that. Reading the summary analysis, it seemed like, I think you could read that title 2 ways. You could say, people don't want us managing the industry. They want the industry to have free reign in the community and do whatever they want, and we're not going to manage the impacts. Or it could mean, we don't want you supporting, and growing the industry. I got a sense from the comments that that one was what made that to the top of the list, or was it a bit of a combo of both?
Okay, so, on those particular questions, again, there wasn't a spot afterwards where we asked, why did you vote the way that you voted? So on one hand, from a totality perspective, I don't know. I have talked to business leaders in the tourism sector who said, I voted for tourism. Yeah, like the private sector is funding it, and and also that we have the head tax dollars that are going towards the things like Seawalk that was previously discussed, and so there doesn't need to potentially be much funding outside of that. I don't think there is much funding outside of that. And so, my impression when I looked at the elements that had the highest, or I guess the lowest priority, the highest priority for maybe being available to cut, is that they were elements of the budget that had a smaller price tag, and so therefore they're going to have a smaller impact. And people picked the elements that might have a smaller price tag and therefore a smaller impact on the Juneau community as a whole. That.
All right, Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I certainly appreciate this. Both of you, it's just wonderful, the amount of work and the speed. And, for future surveys, the voice I'm not seeing is those of our shelter residents and, like Aware and St. Vincent's and Glory Hall and the cold weather shelter. So, they're kind of hidden, and as well noticing that the social services were like, oh yeah, cut those. It's like, do people even know what they're talking about? So, Yeah, that's just something to maybe consider going into low-income housing projects, Crooning Park, just some ideas. So, thank you.
Ms. Heimigner, you have to find a mic somewhere.
Since that was an outreach question, I did want to share that we did reach out to Aware and St. Vincent de Paul and a number of community organizations, several of which shared that they did share the survey with their stakeholders. But I would agree, I didn't feel particularly reflective in the survey, but we did make sure to make that outreach.
Good. Anything further? All right, seeing nothing further, again, thank you, ladies, for all your hard work. I think we'll be able to use this and we should probably give the clap hands. I think this will be a useful document for as we proceed further, and that leads us to our next meeting date, March 16th for the Committee of the Whole. Anything further, Madam Manager? Anything further, Assembly? Seeing nothing, we are adjourned.